attendance without the requirement of a physically present quorum of the Rock Island City Council due to the disaster declaration issued by Governor Pritzker. Because of this order related to COVID-19 health concerns affecting the state and the city, the mayor has determined that an in-person meeting at City Hall with all participants may not be practical or prudent. Alderpersons and staff may not all be physically present at City Hall due to the disaster, and physical attendance at City Hall may be limited. To participate remotely during the public comment portion of the meeting, please join by phone at 1-605-937-7219, PIN 490-343-348#.
Thank you very much. Roll call.
Alderperson Robinson.
Present.
Hurt.
Here.
Gilbert.
Present.
Swanson.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Poulos.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Mayor Tomes.
Here. Thank you. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Remain standing for a moment of silence, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Public comment. Any signatures back there? No signatures. Whoop. All right, I think I talked to, you should have signed in. If you could sign.
While he's signing in, can I go ahead and?
Yes.
Because I do have something for public comment. So in the paper this morning, the Argus Dispatch, there was an erroneous article in there about the city council and the SSA. And I just want to read a correction because there was an error in that. It stated in here that public officials emailed, called, and sent certified mail to ensure businesses were aware of the proposal. It said the city sent out 166 mailers, spoke with 90 of those property owners via the phone or met in person, and had 16 returned to senders. I just want to clarify, the city did not do any of that. The city did not contact anyone. The city did not email those mailers out. This was all done with the Downtown Steering Committee and the Chamber of Commerce. The city had nothing to do with it. So I just want to correct the record. Because I think that's important for people to know that the council has questioned that aspect of what was done, and we were not the ones that were in charge of emailing or contacting anyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Sir, Mike Baxter.
So, I'm Mike Baxter from Muscatine. I'm in the marine industry with towboats and barges, and there's some talk about some ocean containers supposed to be getting put on barges, and they're looking for a Midwest port to handle these from. And I'm going to keep Rock Island in mind when I read the articles. You got some property around here that might be able to, I'll pass your name on when I talk to the people.
That'd be great.
And I think you got some deep water out there south of the Crescent Railroad Bridge, you know, on the Illinois shore. So you try to find us a place and we'll help you out too. Anyhow, the reason I'm here was for the last 4 years I've been working with a group of people about the old Rock Island County Courthouse, trying to keep it from demolition, which is kind of looking gloomy these days, you know, and I wanted to get on the video here, and I'm probably going to go talk to the Board of Supervisors and make a comment that we feel if they do that without first paying for a cultural resource study to examine how it's going to affect the other historic buildings in the area, whether the value is going to go down and it's going to make tourism go away, and it's going to have a negative impact on your city, or was it, I mean, it's just prudent to do a study and know what the consequences are gonna be when you demolish a historic structure that's on the National Register of Historic Places. So, once I make a comment to the Board of Supervisors over at the county, every 3 months, they gotta send a piece of paper into the Illinois State Historic Preservation Office. And when they see that somebody made a comment to the board about, they wanna know what the economic impact is gonna be in the surrounding areas, they could say, the guy's got a point. You're not tearing it down till we get the study done. And I'm on your video, so I can say, yeah, we talked to the city, and we're not joking, you know. And I'm gonna try to get a study done and get that on their 3-month letter to the state. And I think once they get my letter, which is already prepared, I don't think they're gonna be able to get the wrecking ball shined up until this is addressed, because they gotta do something that's right and legal. They can't just do everything, you know, that don't make any sense. So that's all I got to say to you. Mike Baxter from Muscatine, and I left my information how to get a hold of me with the mayor, and a copy of the memorandum of agreement from the state of Illinois about the demolition. And don't give up hope, folks. You know, we want to try to keep your historic district looking good, you know. So thank you for letting me talk, and
You bet. Thank you.
I'm glad you're taking care of this ARPA and gonna do some good with it.
Thank you very much.
Yep, bye.
Appreciate it. Have a good evening. Yes.
We're on this topic. Is there any way to get this county to clean up that site, at least the weeds? It looks so terrible. You come off the bridge and it, you know, it should have been done a long time ago, but.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody else for public comment? Anybody virtual? Hearing, seeing none, we will continue on. Item number 7.
American Rescue Plan Act Proposed Funding Recommendation Plan Presentation.
Hi, good evening. Many of you already know me. Thanks, Tim. So we are here tonight to discuss ARPA, and I will have our city manager, Todd Thompson, give an introduction first before we proceed.
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. We've issued the proposed set of recommendations for the ARPA spending plan to the council. I want to thank Samantha for her good work in putting that together. We've gotten a lot of compliments on it at the presentation and the information so far, and the department directors as well for all the work they put into it. The recommendations were really driven by the council input and rankings, and Samantha's going to talk more about this, as well as the public survey information as well. But as a proposed plan, there's no expectation that you adopt it tonight or endorse it tonight or even come up with a final plan. This is kind of the initiation of the process to try to move forward with doing that. But, you know, the council still needs time to, you know, look at and evaluate the public input and put that together with what we recommended before making final decisions. Tonight, we're going to give an overview of the process, which we got to this point, as well as talk more specifically about the funding recommendations. Some of the funding, you know, recommended projects still need more work and more direction from the council. You know, some of them are general categories. Support the business, you know, will probably be several different types of programs with guidelines endorsed by the council and a process to, you know, take applications and distribute it. So, you know, we fully appreciate some of these do need more detail, but the intent would be to get direction from the council if we're on the right track and whether they want us to move forward with putting together that level of detail. So with that, Samantha?
Sure, thank you. And I think we're probably going to want to meet with all of you one-on-one in the next week. So Naomi and I will be contacting you for ARPA in the next week, just a heads up, and we'll probably need another meeting late September when Randy gets back, so for ARPA. So just to give a brief overview, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we've talked about it a lot, but I just want to make sure the public understands. The American Rescue Plan Act was signed by President Joe Biden March of 2021, and that allocates $350 billion to cities, tribal governments, counties for recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are certain criteria that we have to use. There's going to be rigorous reporting that I'll be doing to the federal government as we start spending down this money. Public health funding, negative economic impacts, premium pay for essential workers, infrastructure, specifically water, sewer, and broadband, and then lost public sector revenue or revenue replacement, which I will be discussing in more detail later on in the presentation. All these funds must be allocated by the end of 2024 and expended by the end of 2026. So the public survey results. The public survey was active from July 1st through July 25th, and we received 1,827 responses from stakeholders, which is representative of a little over 10%. We sent over 16,000 postcards out to mailing addresses. So that number is typical of surveys. I think I was ambitious in wanting 30%. That's kind of the graduate school number, but it's not really realistic for cities and governments. And we asked survey respondents to choose their top 5 priorities. We had a list of 12 categories. I just want to note that all of this will be posted on our website. I want to be transparent as possible. All the data, the raw data, everything will be on the website tomorrow for anybody that's interested. And so from that, we found the top 5 categories were the infrastructure, assistance to businesses, green space, recreational facilities, neighborhoods, public safety, law enforcement technology, and then mental health resources and services. I just also want to note that the survey not only was sent out postcards to everybody, but we also, had this on our website, Facebook. I did some pop-up events. We got some news coverage on this. And then also some of our community partners also reposted this, sent out emails, and it was also advertised at several facilities across the city. So there is the pie graph for you of the top 5 priorities from Rock Island stakeholders. Let's talk about the demographics. So the age group, this is typical of survey trends as well as, who votes? 55 and older, right? So that's pretty typical. The gender, females, which is more of the trend nowadays, that women are surpassing men when it comes to things like this. And then our race ethnic breakdown, of course, majority are Caucasian, and then it breaks down from there. Also, we have our demographics by ward. We asked survey respondents to identify where they lived. The NA represents those that took the survey that didn't live in any of the wards. They might have been Moline. We had several Moline and Davenport stakeholders and residents take the survey as well. So that's representative of that. And then the demographics as far as what is the relationship to the city. And so you could pick several categories. You could live in Rock Island, work in Rock Island. You could just own property in Rock Island. And so there's the breakdown of that. The graph was a little messy, so I put it in this format. Okay. And then comments. So we received 954 comments, specific comments, 952, I'm sorry. And so what I did, it's more subjective, but I try to make it so it's more readable. Again, this will be publicized, so you guys can read each individual comment if you want. And I put these in categories. So as you can see, overwhelmingly, respondents identified roads, which are in a specific eligible category, and I'll talk about that more under revenue replacement later. Libraries, we had a lot of people that are passionate about the library complete the survey and indicate that that is something that they want. Parks as well, the downtown, a lot of people commented about the downtown, and then you can go on. 11th Street is another one, and you can just kind of go down and see from there. Okay, I was going to move on unless everybody wants to kind of look. There's some interesting feedback. So, the museum, somebody said a city museum like St. Louis, or the African American Museum, there's not one in our area. So those were some thoughtful comments as well. Road projects. So roads are not a direct eligible expense under ARPA. And I wanted, because the public overwhelmingly identified that as a need in the city, I wanted to address that. So we have already allocated about $334,000 for the Rock Island Parkway project at the June special meeting. Additionally, we are recommending $1 million towards road projects. But also, I got this from Mike Bartels, this is our road project inventory with the amounts we've requested from various sources such as state and federal grants and loans and things of that nature from 2019. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that, but Mike would be happy to discuss. Right, Mike?
Oh, I don't have a question. I just want to clarify for the audience that the $1 million that's been allocated for roads, because it kept saying in the thing, road repairs not eligible kind of thing.
Right.
That's coming out of the city's lost revenue
Correct.
funds.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, no, it's important to clarify because that's very confusing for people, and I'll discuss that more in depth later on in the presentation. So those are the road projects right now from 2022 that were either applied for or waiting on our congressional offices to let us know what they're going to fund, what they're not going to fund, Bustos and Durbin specifically. And then here we have all of the most recent ones. And the ones in red, Mike, are the ones, again, I'm sorry.
Those are ones that we're currently working on.
Okay, so those are currently what we're working on then. The one to really point out is the big one from the federal government's bipartisan bill, and that's the Safe Streets and Roads for All. That's the $37 million one, so that would be a huge one if we can get that. The federal government's putting a lot of roads through, outside of ARPA, through this bipartisan infrastructure bill. So funding recommendations, how did Todd and I come to that? So we used the guiding principles as the framework, and that helped us guide the proposed funding recommendations. Additionally, members of the city council were invited to put, score projects if they so chose to, and those potential projects were scored with a rubric, and the projects were provided by the department directors. And we use that as the primary basis of the funding recommendations with limited exceptions. Additionally, the other factors that were also considered were the public input from the survey, city staff recommendations, city council goals, and other data sources such as census data and some local data compared to our other cities here in the area. Here is the funding or the rubric that the council used to score those projects. And then let's talk about revenue replacement. So in 2020 and 2021, Linda calculated with the U.S. Treasury's calculator that we lost $3.4 million in 2020, and in 2021, $6.7 million. So we are allowed to take $10 million out of that $26.5 million as lost revenue. And what we are going to recommend, assuming that you guys kind of give us the thumbs up tonight, is Linda and I will bring a resolution forward at the September 12th meeting recommending that we pay portions of the 2020 and all of the 2021 police and fire salaries for that $10 million. Is that correct, Linda? March 21st, I think it is. Yep.
Samantha?
Yes.
So I'm confused. We're allowed up to 10 million lost revenue without having to even justify it, correct?
No, what we were, the auditors recommended is using, because then we'd have to report on all that 10 million. So what we're going to do is pay out all those, which is an eligible allowance, is to pay out all the police and fire salaries, and then that frees up that $10 million in our general fund. So we.
The 10 million we're using for the parking garage and the roads?
Correct,
Okay, I just
correct.
wanna-
That will come out of, that will be general fund.
Okay.
Yep. So that's how we intend to do that.
You're basically saving it, spending it in one area, saving it in the other.
Right.
Right, and that allows us some flexibility with that 10 million. But I just wanted to make sure it was important to note that the city also lost revenue in those years.
It makes the reporting easier, and then it also gives you, indefinite time period during which you could use it if we don't meet those exact deadlines. Yeah.
And to be clear, for the record, because none of this goes towards our pension obligation for those areas, because that
Correct,
is
yeah, that's a big no-no.
that is an area that is
Can't pay
forbidden.
pensions, right.
So this
That's
is
correct.
Just for the salaries themselves.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be very clear about that, because, I don't want to be, I don't want to have to justify us, using this money for the forbidden fruit.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, all right. So the funding recommendations, based on council scores, the projects were broken down into quartiles and also by rank and priority. So here's just an overview of each quartile and then the amounts. We put the requested amounts and the amount we're recommending and then the number of projects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and discuss in more detail. The first and second quartiles will be more, we don't have to discuss too much in detail because it's public survey and the council scoring, but the third and fourth quartiles I'd like to discuss in detail, and then any other projects that the city council wants to discuss in more detail.
Samantha?
Yes.
I would just highlight in the final appendix, which shows the projects divided into quartiles. Those projects are actually prioritized not just by the quartiles, but the order they are in within those quartiles are the order in which they ranked. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so prior approval, we've already talked about this at our June special meeting, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but I do want to note that the Water Domes project, we had originally asked for the 1.5 million. However, the engineers have recommended a different approach, which is much more costly. If anybody has questions, I can defer to Mike Bartels to talk about that. Yeah, you want to come up, Mike? It's looking like.
So originally with the Reservoir Domes, we were looking at replacing a liner and a liner alone. There was going to be some other modifications to that. And in the process, we hired CDM Smith to do a complete evaluation of the dome itself. That also evaluates everything from the dome, including the pumps that pump the water into the dome. And so what they found is, well, first of all, their main concern is that the tanks are 90 years old or approaching 90 years old. So do we want to invest millions of dollars into a product that is 80 to 90 years old and beyond its useful life currently? The second thing that they found were the pumps that are below grade by approximately 20 feet in a structure from 1996 are no longer in compliance with the current 10 state standards. And so the project has evolved, and it's not a final, there's not a final concept. We're still looking into this. This was a part of a EPA inspection for the liner. We were aware about the liner before that, but it was moved forward through the inspection process. And so we're going to be working with the EPA and letting them know where we're at, where we're going with that project, and we'll keep council informed on that as well. But it's looking like we wouldn't be doing anything as long as EPA follows along and is in agreement until at least 2024 with that project. And again, the scope is going to vary. We're looking at needing to replace pumps that are 40 years old, approaching 40 years old, and looking at possibly not, there's 4 domes there currently. We may be looking at removing all 4 domes completely due to their age and coming up with one dome for the whole entire city. It'll take a lot of hydraulic modeling to figure out how much water we need to store at any given time, but that's kind of where we're at. We want to do it right. We did the water filtration facility right. We want to do this project right to last a long time like the previous infrastructure has. So that's where we're at, and that's why we hired the professionals with CDM Smith.
So where would the money come from to pay for this?
Most likely it would be a low-interest loan, an SRF loan through the EPA.
Thanks, Mike.
I have a question about another one of the prior proof, the citywide software.
Yes.
So since when we go to the total, it looks like we've already, or potentially allocated all of the money.
Yes.
So if, as Alderman Robinson had suggested when we first started talking about this, if the software comes back at much higher costs, do we know how we would pay for it, the rest of it?
Well, we do have that $1 million that we're recommending to keep in that lost revenue, so that could cover some of it. I'm sure we could come up with some maybe other creative fundings. I'm going to defer to Todd Thompson on that one.
Yeah, I think like any other kind of project where we estimate the cost and, we'll find out later based on the bid that it may be different, we would try to reduce the scope of the project perhaps, delay the project, or seek other funding sources to try to cover the gap. But that was one of the intentions, keeping a little bit of it in reserve would be for, unexpected things. Just as some projects will come in over, some of the projects might come in under too, so there may be some balance there. But
Right.
the software project, it would, depending on how it goes, it's probably something we could tailor to fit within our budget.
And then I know we received, what, is it 7, Rob, RFPs? Did we have numbers on those, or are they coming in? For the consulting?
So is that just for software? Because
That's just for the consulting.
Dalton?
So about 79 to 120,000.
What had we anticipated? I think we had a number in mind, didn't we? Of what we thought
We
the
did, yeah,
consulting might cost.
so don't get me wrong, before we do any kind of software, we got to replace our databases. I mean, the storage to be able to handle that. So are we even near this figure to try to even get this accomplished?
Tim, did you want to address that in terms of storage?
I mean, I
'Cause
know this number
I don't
seems
know if I'm
high,
equipped
but
to
when
do
you
that.
look at what we are doing and what we have to do, even to be able to handle this, because since I've sat here, this is what I've been told, is that our database is so far off, or our storage is so bad that we almost need to replace everything in order to get a new software, because they don't talk to one another.
Okay, so everything is quite a lot, right? And so
Right.
I have to be careful to define what everything really is, because we took a little time in our invitations to bid from the consultants to define everything we have, but we also said there are some things that are in scope and there are some things that are not in scope. So an example of something that might be out of scope might be the CityWorks application. Public Works uses CityWorks for monitoring assets and keeping track of their work orders and that kind of stuff. And I think we expect that to stay outside of scope. But there are other things that we probably need to roll into scope, things like the core financial software, human resources, probably land management like business licenses and permitting and that kind of stuff. And so we're kind of hoping that those are in scope. One of the goals that we put together for the project overall is to try and raise the level of information that's made available to the general public. So a lot of times that leans you towards doing things in the cloud, since that's what the general public usually has access to.
Mm-hmm.
What that means to us is we may be looking at moving some of our applications to cloud-based applications, in which case, if IT gets what it wants to do, that means that's where the data gets stored to some extent too. Now, the city still owns that data, but at least it would be lived out in the cloud.
And that's very expensive.
It would be more of an operational expense, I think, than an upfront expense. That's true. But we have expenses now for keeping that kind of stuff in-house.
But it depends on what type of, like, software as a service or platform as a service. So all those different layers come with a base model.
They do.
Out of the box. Anything you customize is going to increase that cost.
I
So
think
that's what I
that's-
mean. The cost is going to increase. The cloud isn't cheap. I mean,
No, it doesn't cheat. But at the same time, we don't know everything, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of why we went for some consulting help, is that, well, you don't know what you don't know. And so we're trying to get some assistance to decide what makes sense and what doesn't for the city of Rock Island.
this is my concern, and I don't want to, is this 2.2 enough to even handle what we need?
Well,
I
we
mean,
had
you
to
have a
start-
better idea of what we need as far as scopes and, what's kind of best for the city moving forward to try to handle what we're trying to accomplish. Do we
Well-
think this amount right now, because I'm agreeing with Alderman Judith here, I don't want to get to a point where now we can't fund it and we're stuck with the same system we
Right,
have.
right.
And we're not going anywhere with this.
Well, and piggybacking on that, that's been the issue before. We never had enough money, so we would go with the lower cost ones, and then we like limp by and we have patches and patches and things don't really work, and years later, now we're,
Right,
still
right.
starting over.
I can't necessarily tell you that everything's going to be solved with the magic wand. I mean,
Right.
we've got a lot of work ahead of us. There's no doubt about that. And I think IT kind of sees this as an enormous project that's going to make a lot of folks uncomfortable as we proceed, because anytime you bring in new software, it's change. And change makes people uncomfortable.
A lot of change. That's what I mean. I mean, my current job, we're currently still moving to the cloud, 10 years later.
Right.
It's very difficult.
Right.
It involves a lot of change, but there's a lot of hidden costs that are involved in that also, because anything, again, that's outside of the box, they're going to give you a very basic package. Anything outside of that is going to come with costs, with additional costs.
Right.
So my concern is that we do not shortchange this, because then we're going to be in the same boat. And I understand there's a lot of other projects that are kind of filling that boat right now. Do we need to take a different look at how we're prioritizing some of these projects based on not knowing what that cost is going to be? And I know that's hard to answer, but I mean, I think this is a high priority from everyone that sits here.
Absolutely.
We've always been screaming
Us as
about
well.
communication, being
Are
able
you-
to communicate,
yeah.
bringing us into a different age where we're, not doing everything pen and paper, being able to handle a lot of the new technology that's out there. We're kind of behind the ball on that.
I just have a question about when you were creating the RFP for the consultant. So in scope, I mean, I know that the departments each have their own specific needs, but were the needs that council has been like saying since, the new council was sworn in, was that included too? Like
As
what he said?
best we could understand it, yes. One of the,
New website.
I won't go so far as to say new website, but I think what I would say is that we did look at ways to provide more transparency, more information to the general citizen. One of the things that we're looking at trying to sweep in is utilities, and so we're hoping that the interface that the general public sees when it comes to interacting with utilities is a little more informative, perhaps even easier to use. I think we see from the statistics coming from our website that about 2/3 of the folks who access our website do so using a mobile device of some kind. And so we want to make sure that we bring ourselves to the mobile world, because that's what our customers want. And so the systems we have now, they don't really do that very well. And so all of those things revolve around, the citizens' access and gaining information. And I think that's how we interpreted what the council wants to do, which is to provide greater access to the citizen and improved information available.
Well, I don't even think it's just us. I think it's staff also, because it helps them do their job when they're able to communicate back and forth with the constituents.
Absolutely.
Even with payment, with, doing forms online, and then having the storage capable to handle all of that, because, again, that's another cost. You have to go into storage.
Well, absolutely, and that's finance is the biggest component of this, and then all of our different layers. I can speak obviously from the city clerk's office, not having license available online, and people have to come down to City Hall. That ties in with the CED area with permits. Kind of doing a one-stop shop, everything online. So definitely, our software is very frustrating. I can speak to that firsthand.
But we do have
So-
some contingency funds. There it is, to quote, the $1 million or whatever that's out there that we're not committing to, that, once again, how much do you set aside with the unknown? You don't know, but you would think that at this point, assuming all of that went to that would be, almost half of what it is, we got budgeted now.
I have talked to vendors, and they have given me some budgetary figures. And so we're not completely in the dark with regards to the amount of money that we're asking for. But I won't deny the fact that the scope is still sort of modeling clay at this point. We're still trying to decide what's going to be in scope and what's not going to be in scope. I heard Alderwoman Gilbert ask about the website. I maybe call that outside of scope. And so we'll see what's in it and what's not. One of the things that we may be faced with is, well, there isn't an infinite amount of money.
Right.
So sometimes you got to decide what you really, really need and what you don't.
What you're able to do. Great. I mean, that's why I'm asking you the question. Are you comfortable with what is here to handle what we are projecting, what we may need?
Somewhere, until we get further along with consulting, we're really not going to have a great handle on. And I think hopefully in a couple more months, I'll be able to answer that question with a little bit more definity at this point. But at this stage, the answer is, we don't know what we don't know. And until we get some outside eyes looking on it, and they're a little more in the know with what the industry is doing overall, right? And so we're kind of hoping that they bring some of that knowledge to us, and they're able to give us a little more of an accurate target to aim at.
We had gone down this path a little bit in Galesburg and gotten some quotes on replacing our software package, and, you know, it was well within this amount, because there are some really good municipal software applications that are out there in the market that don't need a ton of customization, and that helps with the cost.
2 points I just want to make sure everyone understands. Software is one thing, but then you have to have either the database to house the software or go to cloud approach, which is still going to be another cost, because then there's operating costs for the cloud. So your storage for your software may not be the same cost. There may be a separate project, but you can't have the software without somewhere for it to house. So, and I know our software, I mean, our storage is an issue, from the cameras, from everything else. So our storage is an issue.
How much,
Okay.
how much did we set aside for the consultant?
We anticipated that it was going to be about 10% of the project, so that was around $225,000.
Oh, okay.
And so the proposals that came in, again, they ranged from $80,000 to $225,000. And so our next step is to sort out those proposals, determine which one makes the most sense for the city of Rock Island, and figure out how to move ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Robinson.
Okay, is there anything else on the prior approved list that anybody wanted to discuss? Okay. First quartile recommended projects. I want to specifically point out some of the projects where the scope has changed. The advanced metering infrastructure, we originally asked, we had you score at a higher amount. We reduced that scope because we are going to use the remaining out of the water fund. There's also all kinds of grants that have not been, the NOFOs, the Notice of Funding Opportunities from the federal government out of that bipartisan bill, that have not been released yet. And also, this is a phased project, so in terms of the timeline with ARPA. The Southwest Treatment Plant Pump Station, we reduced that scope. We recommend the remaining coming out of the sewer fund. Again, the situation with the federal government, whether or not there's a grant opportunity, remains to be unknown at this time. Backup generators for the water treatment plant. We've already applied for a $1.5 million grant. I believe we are pretty confident, can't guarantee it, we're pretty confident we can get that grant. That's a pretty important project. I think that'll stand out. And then the other thing too is the facade program. We recommended increasing the amount. After talking with Tara Sipes, our economic development director, there is a waiting list for that. The current projects, we don't have any funding for that. And then I think we want to expand that program, rename it, and invest in, you know, attracting and retaining businesses. So right now, the scope of the facade, of course, is the exterior. We can expand that to interior, certain things, like you can't get new furniture and things of that nature, but to make it more attractive for businesses, because a lot of that upfront is, you know, just even doing some of the interior work to even locate here. So we think that will be advantageous for our businesses.
Is that citywide?
Yes, that will be citywide. We can do specific, we can make it like, you know, 100,000 specific to the downtown. I've had, just from the liquor license perspective, we've got two new businesses, one in particular going in the Hilltop neighborhood where the old Cool Beans was, and she's interested in the facade grant. But of course, there's no funding right now available for her, so we recommend that for, so yeah, citywide.
Samantha, I got a question
Yes.
real quick. So the broadband and fiber optic infrastructure, is that citywide or is that in a specific area?
So that is in a specific area, Tim. Did you have a specific question for that?
Where
What
was-
area?
Whole citywide.
Citywide.
Okay.
Is that the project with the Ethernet switches or something?
Fiber optics.
That are 10 years old or something?
Yep, the Ethernets and the city properties, the fiber cable.
So I have a question going back to our advanced metering. Because you said we've reduced the scope.
Yes.
So are we still going to change our meters and go to a monthly billing system and all of that was in the proposal?
Absolutely.
I could talk a little bit about it. We didn't reduce the scope, we just reduced the dollar amount that was gonna come from ARPA, would be more accurate, I think.
Yeah, so we originally requested 2.5 million, and that was half of the cost of the 5 million. The biggest majority of the cost is water meter replacement. We have to replace the water meters, residential water meters, to be able to go to the advanced metering infrastructure.
Right.
So AMI, AMR, AMI is basically all fully automated. No one needs to drive around and read water meters or walk as we currently do. AMR is in a vehicle, driving the zones that we currently have and just ding, 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 collecting every one as we go and be done instantaneously as well. It's very fast. There's not much cost difference between the two. It's $250,000, $300,000 between going from a drivable system to the automated, fully automated AMI. With the phased approach, with reducing the scope down, our first direction would be to look at our zones that we currently read that are the most difficult to read, meaning if it's obstacles, dogs, fences, just problems with the current reading system now. So we would focus on those. We'd be looking at doing 5,000 to 6,000 meters with that 1.5 million, and then budgeting funds in the remaining years to get to that fully automated system. So it could take 4 to 5 years to get to that. The good thing is that this needs to be done. I know JCI included or looked at replacing the water meters in the performance contract, and they did some testing of those, and they were 90 to 96% accurate, but they're 21 years old. If you ask a metering manufacturer, they'll warrant a current water meter for 10 years is the longest they'll warrant those. So they're very impressed at our meters, and we are having problems with them, and we're replacing water meters weekly. So it's a project that needs to move forward. Like I said, in the document I submitted, we're one of the remaining cities who walks around and collects. We have a water meter reader that walks the entire city 4 times a year.
I saw.
A question if I may, the monthly reporting system or billing is not contingent upon the new meters, is it?
It would be, yes. We would need to.
So that would be 3 or 4 years down the road?
But again, that could be phased as well. But I'd have to speak with Linda. I think I don't think you'd want to integrate that, but zone by zone. I think you'd want to be going to. We're not that far yet, but it could be implemented as we complete a zone and replace the meters and get fully automated. We could go to that type of billing because we could collect the readings quickly enough to get a bill out that monthly. But
I just see that as a benefit to the consumer.
Most definitely.
What's the reason, what is it about the meters that keeps us from doing monthly?
Well, that's why I brought Jason here. He's a more technical guy.
Yeah.
And so if he wants to speak
Is it just a
on
challenge
that,
in trying to read them?
Yeah, I'll let him talk of that. I'm more high level. He can get into the detail.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
What is it about our current system that, precludes monthly billing?
So our system now is touch read. So all the information comes out to the side of the house, and that's why we physically have to go around and touch the side of the meter. Now, we do have some radio reads that we do bring in on a handheld type reading device. For some of our businesses, our harder to reach meters, are harder to access meters, but it's basically in the meter and in the meter head.
So you could not get around fast enough to do it monthly billing?
Oh, now?
Yeah.
Currently, no.
Yeah, that's why,
Yeah, currently now, to read, it pretty much takes the whole quarter, and then by the time you do rereads, rechecks, everything like that, then we're starting into another billing cycle. That's kind of why we try to read all of our zones in a quarter, bill, and that's, but ultimately, I feel a goal would be a monthly billing cycle. I think with that, it kind of eases that burden of that larger bill that residents see.
Huge.
And it also makes with any kind of future increase, you're able, people are more apt to see that on their bill as a smaller increase rather than that quarterly bill of months.
And I don't know if our software will do it or not, but I think some places will monthly bill based on estimates, and every quarter they true it up. So I don't know if that would be an option or not either.
Yeah, and ultimately, when you get to an AMI, so AMI, like Mike described, AMI is kind of where, we would have some structures installed, some posts, some poles, where you'd have these readers. So AMI is, it automatically reports to finance. If a customer came in, they could, look up that bill. They could pull that information from the customer's home. Customers could come in and get accurate readings, I've got a leak or what's going on. And I think those are important things for the residents too, knowing if you got a leak. Right now on quarterly, if you had after your meter gets read, and then it could be months before you realize that you got a leak based on your bill, and then you've got a huge bill. So we've seen that. So AMR and AMI it's a buildable system. So, we're kind of looking at this as a baby step. Right now we have nothing. And we've worked with meters. We tried to run it through JCI. Ultimately, they did a push-pull where they pulled some meters, did some testing. So efficiency, meaning that what that meter was reading was 90% accurate, 95% accurate, meaning that what the water that was going through there was being measured. So they were looking at that. They weren't looking at the failure of a 20-year-old meter. So they were looking for payback based on the meter. What we're looking for is other paybacks, such as personnel that we're utilizing to read all these meters, finance, having to deal with the customers, the residents getting frustrated because they can't get real-time information. So.
And I'm sure that's going to require newer software for databases. I'm sure that's going to require new software, more databases.
Yeah, there would be software. Right now, the only software that we utilize is what software, the building type software.
Gems.
And we do have some minor software for the ones that we are currently, reading. Hard to get.
I seen you stand up, so you know I was asking.
With regards to software, everything starts once you read the meter. So it's not really possible for them to send out a monthly bill unless we read the meter every month, because that's where it all begins as far as the software systems are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do have a 3-pay option now, which some might think is a monthly bill, but it still only reads the meter once a quarter.
Right.
And it has a tendency to impact the most at risk in our community, because they don't know that they got a leak until it's too late.
Right.
And they see a humongous bill, and at first they're like, this can't be right. And then panic sets in, and frustration and anger. When you get a water bill that's $600, $700, $800, and you're expecting it to be $300 maybe, or $250, that's a heart stopper. So reading the meter is the very first step. That's where we have to begin.
Thank you.
Okay, the last one I don't think I've talked about is the infill housing. We did reduce that amount. We think there's a partnership. Of course, it's very early on. We haven't identified that partnership, but I think we're pretty confident that that $100,000 would get us some infill housing with some partnerships. And I know, Moses, you and I have talked about that as well, so.
Well, that wasn't the same amount, though, was it?
Yeah, it was like $1 million we had originally recommended, and then we reduced that to the 100,000, just thinking about the potential partner and what their needs would be.
So how many houses do we think we can do with 100,000?
Well-
You want to let Miles talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, he can talk a little bit.
100,000 is a huge reduction.
So the idea here would be is that it would be a program where we provided an incentive to a partner. So we would not be covering the total cost of a build. What we would be doing is contributing toward the cost of a build. How much we would be contributing towards every single one of those builds is yet to be determined. So the idea here would be is that we would find a partner who would be willing to do infill housing construction on some of the many vacant lots that we got. So we would be offering kind of a dual incentive in this situation, right? We'd be offering land for free, which is a big incentive, and then some portion of that dollar amount. That could be $10,000, it could be $5,000. It depends ultimately, again, on what you finally decide with your funding allocation and the nature of the partnership when it is developed.
So are we going to put out an RFP for partners?
That's what CED has discussed doing. We want to provide an opportunity for different partners to come forward. We could do multiple partners. Again, we're very open to different options here. When we have worked with a partner in the past, like Habitat for Humanity, they have asked us to cover a specific cost inside of their project, like the water sewer connection, which might be $6,000 to $8,000 in the total cost of a $150,000 to $165,000 build. So you can kind of imagine how this could work in different ways. It could be tailored to specific parts of a project. We could have multiple partners who do different things where we're contributing. It's open to a number of different opportunities. The thing here that I would highlight is that, as we've talked about before, we don't have home money from HUD. We've only got the CDBG money, right, which can't be used for new builds. So right now, we don't have any funding at all to really obviously chip in if someone wants to build a house like that. We just don't have an obvious source of funding. So even a little bit would do more than the nothing we're doing now.
So while you're up there, the housing rehab, is that
Yep.
kind of example of like we did before? Purchase a home and something like that and rehab it and sell it?
No, so the idea here that we've talked about is we would design an in-house parallel rehab program, and this is again very preliminary, which would help to cover repairs to owner-occupied housing that we already have, covering stuff right now that it's difficult for us to cover with our CDBG-funded housing rehab programs. So as an example, we might receive an application for assistance and go to a house. There's a whole bunch of different things we could help with, but because of what CDBG allows us to do in regards to especially lead, we may have to have a reduced scope because we will not be able to touch certain elements of the house without triggering rules that will dramatically increase the cost of a project that if you were using normal money wouldn't be anywhere near as expensive, okay? One of the reasons, for example, that we don't tend to do winterization work on homes is because the exteriors are covered in lead paint. And so a project that might, for a regular person to do who's not subject to those rules, be X amount, for us, suddenly the paperwork and the cost and the lack of availability of lead-certified contractors and this and that and the other thing, and suddenly the cost just starts to go up and up and up and up and up until the project isn't feasible. So the idea would be is that we would bulk out our suite of owner-occupied housing rehab assistance programming so that we had this parallel pool of cash that would supplement the HUD-funded stuff. Does that make sense? The idea here is not to do a whole house rehab program with that amount because, as we all know, that'd be one house, two houses maybe.
Because you did double the amount in that budget that we just passed, I don't know, a month or so ago, right? For the
Are you talking about the annual action plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's already some CDBG fund money that I would recommend be used for that, right? So this is to try to cover a missing piece of our program, or that's the preliminary idea. I've asked the community development team to kind of work out some options on what this would look like, identifying those items that they normally are not really able to touch pragmatically, and then kind of start to work out what that would look like. The idea, though, on the applicant's side, so the person seeking assistance, it'd be all the same to them. They wouldn't be burdened with anything different. They would just have some sense that we were offering a little more help than we'd been able to offer in the past.
So how does this work as far as the reporting in regards to ARPA?
So for this specific category, what I have to report is disproportionately impacted. So I demonstrate that through the census tract. So we'll just have to be mindful, which most of our housing rehabs are already in those census tracts, and that's what I'll be reporting specifically.
Well, I guess I mean the time frame. Does this?
Oh, okay. So we have to make sure that that funding is allocated by the end of 2024, but we have through the end of 2026 to expend that. So we do have some timing there.
and we can expend it. Trust me. Yeah, what would end up happening too, just to double up on the reporting thing, is if we basically use the same application process we already have in place for our existing housing rehab program, we collect quite a bit of information, including that they're income eligible per HUD. So that'll be super easy to plug into the ARPA reporting.
Any other questions for Miles or for the first quartile? Well, we won't be going too far away, so thank you. Okay, are we ready to move on to the second quartile projects? Again, I'm going to highlight the ones that, we reduced the amount, support to businesses. I think we recommended up to $1 million. But we also increased like the facade program, which assists businesses. And that was just to kind of balance the $26.5 million as well with all the other projects that we're recommending. Douglas Park, we have other funding sources identified. We got the T-Mobile grant, if you remember, and then Friends of Douglas Park will match that. So that went from $300,000 to $200,000. Sunset Marina, I believe the original ask was $3.5 million. We reduced to the $1 million, which is what is required for the FEMA grant. And then. Go ahead, Judith.
With regards to Sunset Marina, I've asked this before.
Defer to Mike.
Can we get more information, Mike, from, I guess we could start with F3 Marina or commercial brokers or appraisers, or find out at least what potential real options are for what to do with the property?
So depends what options you're looking for that F3 might provide. They're more in a management company. They're not really looking at.
Oh, okay. Well, whoever we have to talk to find out, like, okay, is it a potential sale? And what could we expect to get in a sale? Or what would we have to do for a sale? Or would we never recoup our money? Or, I don't know. I'm looking for any out-of-the-box ideas so we see some options before we start putting money down the rabbit hole. Kind of thing.
Yeah, so, and I just sound like a broken record, but we have to address the FEMA grant. It's going to expire. We've done a few presentations trying to update the council on the needs. Yes, there's more needs in the 400 dock. There's $16 million of improvements that should be done. They don't have to all be done, but we have to address the FEMA grant. If we want to move forward with the 400 dock, we have to have that done and completed by July of 2023. So we originally was coming in March of this year to move forward with that project, but we waited for this process. So that really needs to be discussed. Dredging needs done. It should be done at the same time, but there's not enough funding for that. And that's why in my request, I put the $3.5 million. If you're asking me, does the revenues cover the expenses? No, it won't. If it's fully occupied, it will not fund it.
Well, yeah, you've already told us that several times, I think. But what I'm saying is, a conversation with several commercial brokers to find out, is the property viable for a sale? And
I guess my question would be, does the council want someone, whether it's Public Works or CED or whomever, to go and try that opportunity or look at that option?
I'm just saying, because we know that, we could continue to pour, as you said, up to $16 million into it, but we may never see any of that money back.
You won't see that number back because there's not enough slips to cover the expense. There's not enough number of slips to bring in the revenue for it.
Okay, so my point is then, at what point do we stop and say, okay, we'll fund up to X amount of improvements, but... I
think, and again, past presentations, I know Public Works has become, since about 2016, maybe even before that, we've been saying, does the city of Rock Island still want to own a marina? And that's what the council has to decide.
Do we want to be in the boat slip business?
But the issue then also becomes, and it's a good question, and I don't have an answer, short of, if we want to leverage some money with FEMA on these issues, that time is limited that window, and I don't know if they match up with going and investigating whether to sell it or not sell it or rent it or whatever it is.
I guess I would use what
Questions
Mr.
I've been
Bain
asked
said.
for
I
years.
would look at options. We don't know what we don't know, you know? Losing, you sitting here saying, we're gonna lose money, that's not a wonderful aspect, you know?
Yeah, it's budgeted at a deficit, I think, this year of about 250,000.
Yeah.
How much is the FEMA grant?
The FEMA grant is 1.4 million, or 75% of the project cost. We're estimating the project costs in current dollars, because this was going back, I think, from 2020. We're at around 2.9 million for an estimated cost. That's for the 400 dock, electrical upgrades to allow the electrical to be above the flood elevation for historic flood, so it won't be damaged further. And then there's some shoreline restoration.
If we would have done it, I'll say a year ago, I'm terrible at timing, but it would have been
Well,
less than
again,
this.
these are estimates,
Yeah.
so, you know.
Our portion would have been less, but it's up because the inflation up.
As everything.
And FEMA did not increase theirs to the inflation, and so we have to take the hit for the inflation part of it.
Well, nothing's getting cheaper.
Did you say 2.4 for all those things you just named?
2.9,
2.9.
yes.
But we only have 1.4 from FEMA plus whatever,
Million?
1 million.
1 million.
So that's half a
Yeah,
million short.
so our match is 25%, and we were figuring 700, well, it's in my submittal there. We feel our approximate match would be $725,000 to complete the project.
Which another key part is the electrical part of it, is the other key part of this, not just the docks.
So we're
Yeah, that's all
still
included in
Yeah,
that
that's
2.9.
exactly.
short of $500,000.
No, so it's, the grant was, when we submitted the cost, that's what we had for an estimate, okay? But we went out for an RFQ with a consultant, and that was when we were gonna come, this is the council memo, we were gonna come in March, and we were working with the consultant, and they gave us that new estimated number with the inflation cost,
2.9.
2.9. That's correct.
Yes, and then
And
the
s-
25% was 725, and I think there were some other improvements not
Yeah,
related.
that includes the electrical upgrades, as I mentioned, and then there's some shoreline restoration.
In the million.
Wrapped into that
roof,
cost.
I think, or something, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. It's a difficult decision, but we have to make a decision on how we're gonna move forward with the marina, because it's gonna keep costing us money no matter what.
Yeah, we're running out of time to take advantage of the FEMA funds and complete the project. We've already applied for extensions, and there is no more extensions after July of '23.
I feel
So,
like if
we're
we
kinda at a
don't,
crossroads.
if we don't move forward with this, then we've basically given a death sentence to the marina. I mean, that's my opinion. The dock needs to be replaced. We've got FEMA money, 75% of the project. We have to pay 25%. If we choose not to do that and let that FEMA grant expire and not use, then my personal opinion is whether we have made a conscious decision or not, our decision that was made through inaction is we're cutting it loose. We're letting it fail.
And I
And
agree.
so I'm for the repairs of it, because you're not gonna be able to sell it, you're not gonna be able to lease it, you're not gonna be able to do anything with it unless you fix what's broken on it.
Especially
Or we'll
electrical.
be able to
Still
sell it at a
missing-
lower price.
You're still missing the
So-
dredging also, though, that's needed.
Now,
Right.
can I bring up,
The other docks need repaired too?
yes, there's a lots of things that need repairing of us. Let me bring up one other, I'll say, process that could complicate it, but could simplify it or make it helpful in the end, is that the city of Rock Island is looking at doing a city port district. Okay? And city port district, if that becomes a reality, there is federal infrastructure money available for, would it be dredging and other items. And I give the example is Savannah just got, I can't remember how many million.
I remember
A large
reading
million,
that, yeah.
large, I'll call it 5 million, but don't quote me on the dollars, but it's a large. Quincy in this deal just also got like 13 million. And so there's some, and then in this is also monies available for small boat marinas, or, pleasure craft marinas, is in the infrastructure, federal infrastructure budget, infrastructure monies. Now, obviously, once again, like a lot of these things, there's no guarantees and everything else, but we really feel we can establish, it should not be a problem. It takes state legislator to pass a bill authorizing this port district. It would be citywide for the city of Rock Island. And then the federal government already recognizes it. All we need is the state recognition. The state feds already recognize it. That then we can begin to do grant requests. And a number of cities up and down the Mississippi and on the Illinois River have already gotten, counties and cities have gotten these large grants. And so there's some monies out there to be able to do that. And so, yes.
I was just gonna ask about a timetable.
So as I was reviewing, that, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a significant amount of money should the city get that. But it's also true, correct, that it says in here, the only significant city in Illinois on an inland waterway that does not have it. So I would think.
We are.
Is us.
So that is, to me, that's promising for us.
Correct.
Now, would it be possible to move forward with this, and should this money come forward, replace the money that we would be spending ARPA-wise with some of that money, that grant, and then put that money back into
without
use
doing more
as ARPA stuff, or no?
Without doing more research on those grants that are available,
Right.
I don't know if that's eligible. Most grants are not eligible for refinance.
Typically, grants don't work that way.
Typically, they do not.
Okay, I didn't understand, so.
Well, yeah,
I
no,
just
that's a
wanted
great question,
clarification.
though. That's a
Go
great
ahead.
question.
But would this $1 million come out of the general fund that we could replace?
No, hang on, just a second. You were going to say something, Todd?
Yes.
I was just say something on timing on the port district. Likely, you'd get legislation passed next year, be eligible for the following grant cycle, be awarded in the following year. So, before you see any port district grant money, you're probably talking about 24.
Right. Typically, the bill would go in front of the legislators in February or so, give or take, of '23. I gotta remember what year we're in. And then, of course, depending on the cycle for that federal grant, and then when those are awarded and everything else, Todd's correct, that you wouldn't see cash, so to speak, until 2024.
Was this a revenue replacement?
Correct, yeah, to Alderman Healy's.
so
Yeah,
you-
that's not an eligible,
You would have
under
time to spend
restricted
it,
funds.
but your FEMA grant,
The FEMA grants what complicates things,
match, yeah.
is that timing.
That would be, I would propose moving forward with it, because like Alderperson Swanson mentioned, and, several others, we're not gonna be able to sell it or do anything else with it unless we make some upgrades anyway. And I feel like if we just let it die in the water, then we're kind of it's taking some element out of us trying to get the port district, right? I mean, it seems like we're gonna let one fail and then bring it on, and then it's gonna be hard to
Correct.
bring that one back after we've already lost the opportunity to collect some FEMA money.
That's correct.
Well, I think it's a strong incentive if you let this fail.
Right.
Why on earth would they give us the port authority, the port
Well,
district
and
recognition?
the other thing is, we all talk about the marina, but there's a lot of other businesses down there that are reliant upon the marina. I mean,
That's correct. I mean-
So we look at that, but there's also other businesses downtown, or not downtown, but down near the marina that are affected, that they would have to probably close up shop.
That's correct. There's two large businesses on the
I think
marina.
the most important thing, though, is like Mike said, it's never going to bring a profit.
The
marina's never gonna bring a
It may
profit.
never, and so you still can hang on to something that doesn't make money. Our ambulance service does not make money. We lose $1 million, $1.5 million on that every year.
I get what you're saying, but that's
$2 million on
totally,
that
that's
every year.
totally different.
Right, but.
No, it's not totally.
That is. We can't stop an ambulance
Parks,
service, but we can
parks
stop
don't
a
make money,
marina.
we still subsidize parks. I'm just saying, there's a lot of things in cities that but I'm still not precluding. I am not promoting that we don't look at selling, or we don't look at leasing it. I'm okay with looking at that, okay? That we may want to purge ourselves of owning a marina. I'm okay with that, looking at that. But the issue is you gotta have something to be able to lease, or you gotta have something or sell that's worth something, and you're not gonna be able to do that unless you do these kind of things and maintain it. It's just like your home or anything else. If you don't maintain it, what's it worth? And so if there's any hope for anybody to look at it to buy or lease, you gotta have a little curb appeal. You gotta have, and some bones to it, like the electrical and everything else, to be able to look at those things.
One of the things that we can't put a dollar figure on is the amenity, the value of the amenity that brings to the citizens or potential citizens or visitors to Rock Island.
Correct.
That's right.
A lot of parks don't generate money. They're a
It-
park,
It's,
they're a
it's,
green
it's
space
it's
area,
the
whatever.
river. No matter if you have a marina or not, they can't take the river. So the river's gonna be there if the marina's there or not. I mean, I'm just looking at, there's so many shortfalls that we have throughout the city, and we're going to continue to put money into a project that we know we're never gonna get any investment back from.
But
You need to have amenities that draw people in. And I look at the different marinas around the Quad Cities and up and down the river, because we use the river a lot. But you look at the amenities up and down, and I mean, you got Go Fish up in Princeton. I mean, there's a restaurant up there. It's drawing people in. Now, is it making oodles of money for the city? Probably not. But it's an amenity that brings people into your city.
It does.
I
That's
mean,
a
if
very-
we've got nothing to bring people into Rock Island, then why on earth would anybody ever come here?
That's a very small percentage
And-
of
and-
even
and-
our residents who
but it's
use the
still-
marina. Even when we had the dock out here, it did not get used that much. So just having the dock is not pulling people in, because if that was the case, we will have way more traffic in the downtown area because of the dock we have there.
But
So
if
we
there-
can't, and I get what you guys are saying, believe me, I get you. I'm just trying to make a point that this is a lot of money that we can use in other parts of the city based on the CIP that we're never able to fund and everything else that we know we need to do. We're going to put a lot of money into that marina.
But the issue is, if that marina, if there's the downside of it if you don't. I'm not saying this is all automatic. But if you don't put this in, and you do not find someone to buy it or lease it, now what do you do? Do you let it silt in?
We're kind of stuck because the previous administrations never did anything, and it's continued to just trickle down the road.
I
The
agree.
can has
For
been
past
kicked. Like I
sins.
said, I get it. The can has been kicked, and it's kind of stuck against a corner right now.
Right.
But we have to, I just want to make a point. That is a lot of money that's going to take to bring that marina back to life, even to make it a draw for people to use.
That's
it.
right.
Because right now, people can't even really get in there because of the silt, because of the docks, because of all the things that are wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
In order to get it up to where it is presentable, it's going to take a lot of money.
Okay, I understand the issue. Now the problem is, what is the reaction? If we do nothing, we don't do this, and you cannot find, I'm looking at worst case scenario, you cannot find someone to lease or buy it. Now what do? You continue to let it go down because it's not making money, and eventually it's a silted-in swamp. The river's still out there, but that area is a silted-in swamp. And what you have, you lose the boat ramps, you got how many fishermen use it, we have bass fishing out there, you got the Floatzilla, you got a number of those things that no longer have a facility. You also have a retail shop that's not far from there that could cause them to go out of business.
Probably would.
Okay, you've got another, on the other end of the deal, you have a business, a business that takes care of bigger boats that could potentially go out of business because they don't have those boats to maintain or store. There's storage there now, because so now you've just, I want to say killed. You've potentially eliminated two strong businesses in the city.
Well, let's say worst case scenario.
And you have nothing that's silted in. I can go to the Cocky Boat Yards where they used to make boats right next to that's now all dry land.
But if that does silt in, we still have the riverside where we have a launch.
But what we do, by the way, the launch has been abandoned because it's unsafe because of current and rock piles out there. So that's not a safe launch. And you take a look at what Davenport does, they're launching boats there and everything else has been a problem. So that's not a real good viable launch.
Well, one other point of information, when you're talking about silting in, so back in, I believe, the 1950s, the city agreed to the Safe Harbor Act, which is the Corps has to maintain that entryway from the river a certain distance into the actual Potter's Lake portion. So the channel to get in from the river into the Potter's Lake has to be maintained, but our fulfillment of the agreement is to maintain boat docks, not dock necessarily, boat access. So, and there is docks or boat access ramps in Potter's Lake. So as long as we maintain those, they will maintain the entryway in from the river. Now, granted, we've asked them to do that, and they've been slow to move. But we did meet with them earlier this year, year. John, you were with in that meeting, and they were moving forward with that, but it still has not been
And Dick
done.
Durbin, you had a conversation with himself, with his office, about the dredging and everything else in that entranceway and everything else
Correct.
this year, and that was ranked fairly high on their list. It didn't quite make it but it ranked fairly high in getting that dredged and work with it.
So my point to point that out is, or my reason to point that out is that we will never get away from having to maintain some boat docks there because of that Safe Harbor Act agreement. But that doesn't correlate to the marina, but there is, access will be maintained through the Safe Harbor Act.
So, with this potential port district, so where would the port be?
What it does, believe it or not, it's a terminal and more than a
Right.
port. And it has to be owned by the municipality, which we do own a terminal. And we lease it to Alter with a 99-year lease. And, but that's fine. That still makes it qualified to have what you want to call a port or terminal.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Now, you can also have privately owned ones, and there, we do have one of those also. Riverstone privately owns one. So that's what they classify. But believe it or not, in the way that it words is, when and if this happens, it's the whole city is the port. The port district. And it can work with, you can get monies for ancillary type things that support that, be it rail, be it road. So I-92 supports that terminal. We could potentially get grant funds and infrastructure federal to repay or to redo or maintain 92. There's rail spurs along there that service both Alter and Riverstone and potentially where Norcross is, or Honeywell and everything else, that there's monies there that could work on rail spurs that all fall under this when you have a port authority. So it's not just along the river as you would envision a terminal.
Okay.
It can be citywide.
How come no one ever brought this to our attention before?
There's a
Got an
gentleman,
email this week.
Bob Sprinkler, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at names, as everybody knows, but he's a retired Corps of Engineer gentleman that has brought this forth a while back ago, and several of the other counties along the river had picked up on it and done it. We obviously, and I say we, typically they're done by counties and not city. There's some complications and issues, was more than I wanted to, or not wanted to, but we really needed to get delve into this with ARPA stuff. But when you do a county, you have to have an authority, a board, another governing board, intergovernmental agreements, and the governor assigns those board members, and that drags out, as we know, the bureaucracy and red tape with that. So by doing it just our city,
And we can do it just our city.
that's the indications at this point. A bill has actually physically been written. We're working on detailing that out right now to submit. And so it appears that can be done, that we can do it as a city, and in the future could be expanded to other cities. We're not out any money, the state's not out any money.
A ton to gain.
So, that's exactly. So, it looks good. None of them have been turned down at this point that have gone through. Rock Island County is the only county along the Mississippi that does not have one. And it's affected the Corps of Engineers also in trying to get their monies. So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to dive into that, but it affects the marina.
No, I think it's a game
I was gonna bring that up
changer,
if you didn't anyway,
possibly.
Mike, so I'm glad you did, though.
So, it is close. We feel good about it.
The one other thing, when I was coming to council in March, that was just to request a permission or approval to move forward with request for qualifications for the consultant to see what the cost would be to do the design for the 400 dock and the electrical repairs. We were looking at Edgewater Resources from Madison, who works with F3 Marina. They were the most qualified company. And then we were working with IMEG here in Rock Island for the 400 dock electrical upgrades. So I could have that back to council at our next meeting in September. If everyone would like to see that. There's no cost associated with that. The cost would come after we negotiate the cost to do the design work, and then that would be another meeting to come back for approval.
So you're asking for permission for the RFQ?
That needs to happen first so that we can move forward with selecting the consultant to do the design work, because this project isn't even designed yet.
We can't do that
Can we
here,
do
though,
that tonight?
because it's not on the agenda.
On the 9/12/2022 agenda. I think we should. The next. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Does that answer any questions on the sunset?
Question?
Yes, it is. Good discussion.
Dinkman basketball court resurfacing, CDBG's gonna kick in $100,000 for that, so that was reduced to $200,000. The other thing, support to nonprofits, I'll defer to Todd to discuss this. The scope was originally $750,000, but we wanted to include tourism in there because we do have a lot of nonprofits with the tourism as well. So Todd, I'll let you just clarify that some more.
Yeah, you could break up the 750 however you want. This is one of those items that we would like some direction from the council on what kind of the guiding criteria would be. But we would anticipate that support to nonprofits wouldn't be to reimburse them for losses. It would be to conduct ongoing programs or projects that support the goals of the council and the guiding principles, and we would anticipate putting together some type of application process with some type of criteria that would be prioritized, and then we would go through a process of ranking them. So perhaps if you had the 500,000, you could do grants up to 25,000 or 50,000 that met the criteria, something along those lines. But if it's something that the council would, like to pursue, it's something we would have to work on the details of. The original 750 did anticipate some tourism. Tourism is a major, priority of the federal funding. So we broke out part of it for that, just to highlight that fact. But it could be incorporated into one, or it could be divided into different types of programs as well.
So,
I personally would like to see that worded differently. I would like to see the aid to tourism as a separate thing and take it out of that.
It is in the overall budget.
Correct, but
So-
even on here, I just think it would.
Okay. I guess that would be at the will of the rest of your colleagues, how we want to structure that. I also wanted to point out with that too, as the public survey identified, mental health was number 5. So we could almost, in terms of some of the criteria we could set to address the mental health, homeless, and some of those other things that were identified in the survey.
my biggest issue with this is the subrecipient agreement, because we have to report back to ARPA how this money is used, and once we give it out to a nonprofit, kind of lose control over how it is spent, and if a nonprofit were to choose to spend it however they wanted to and not necessarily in accordance with the grant or how it was supposed to be spent for ARPA, then the city's on the hook to pay it back.
Well, and I recommend taking both the support to businesses and to nonprofits out of our unrestricted funds. And the reason for that is the auditor told Linda and I, it's the reporting requirements to the federal government are so rigorous. And that's another reason why we kind of reduced that amount from $1 million to $750,000. We basically, they're kind of skeptical of a lot of cities having to pay back that money if they use those specific categories because all of the reporting requirements that are involved. So we would still do a sub-recipient agreement for the city and that whatever it is, but we wouldn't have to report that to the federal government just for that purpose of the.
I do support with mental health being one of the top 5 criteria.
Yes, absolutely.
That in our guidelines for the grant, that there is that mental health component, because there is a huge need for it. And there are a lot of nonprofits based in Rock Island
That already
who
do that. Yep.
Would it be better to, I don't want to say better, would it be easier to use what we already have in place? For instance, the Citizen Advisory Committee. They receive application from nonprofits and they make a decision based on the application to distribute funds. Instead of trying to create a new application process, if they already have an application process in place, kind of the same thing with the businesses. We have the CURLIF program. Could we put funds into that, and we already have that in place, instead of creating the, why try to reinvent the wheel?
We could. So currently, the ordinance reads for the Citizen Advisory Committee, I can't remember if it's $50,000 or $100,000 of gaming funds. We haven't had gaming funds, and it's 50 total in gaming funds, and then they allocate, so for example, community caring conference and things of that nature, and then they allocate that funding, and it doesn't come to council. That Citizens Advisory Committee allocates that. We could certainly use that. We'd have to, change some of the language in the ordinance, but if council so wishes, we could definitely use that for some of it, yes.
Because if we don't use that, who will be the determining factor over who's awarded the funds?
I would say we would do a committee. It would be comprised of myself, Todd, maybe Linda, or another director, maybe a member of city council. I think we'd probably want a member of the citizen, this is my recommendation, it's not, a member or two of our community, business community, nonprofit community, citizens. We'd have a committee.
So that's what I'm getting at. Why,
Right, no, and exactly, I see what you're saying. We have a
'Cause now
curl of
you have
committee,
to-
we have a citizens advisory committee. Can we expand that?
You could just do a resolution. Resolutions are for temporary things, and for ARPA funds, say, use the CAC, and here's how we're amending
Yeah, we could do
the
that without
CAC
changing the ordinance.
That's
Yeah.
for these ARPA funds.
Is there an alderman on the community advisory committee?
No.
There's not,
Then I oppose that, because
Yeah.
this is our money to spend, and, yeah, there needs, council's responsible for the fiscal health and responsibility and transparency of the city, and so if you want to do that, then you can put an alderman on that committee, but,
right, looking,
Right.
okay.
So just to clarify for the
Yes.
public, when you say use unrestricted funds for aid to nonprofits, assistance to small businesses, aid to tourism, are you talking about the lost revenue funds?
Correct.
I just want to clarify. Those, and maybe you could explain for the
Yeah,
public.
and I'm going to actually later on in the presentation discuss unrestricted versus restricted funds when it comes to ARPA. So,
you're-
getting ahead of myself a little bit.
If you're worried about the recipients not performing, you could always make it reimbursement based. After they had achieved what they did, you could reimburse them.
I like that.
Absolutely, we could do that. With the facade is definitely like that as well. Yeah, we could do that.
Definitely make sure, like we're trying to parlay with FEMA, with Sunset, that we parlay with whoever is applying for these grants. So any dollar that they put in goes to help our city. So, if we're giving them money, it's great.
Because, sorry to say, but we all know that nonprofits can be manipulated by other people for their own gain.
It's a good opportunity to leverage your funds too. You can make it a
Absolutely.
25% or a 50/50 match, so that the agency has to put something into it.
And it's also an opportunity to do, I don't know if this was Dylan at the beginning, the RFP, or maybe it was you, Judith, what do they have ideas that they can do to help? So let them give us some ideas of some creative things that we can do for our city.
Samantha, I got a quick question.
Yes.
So when we talk about the funds that are, I guess I'm kind of getting ahead as well, but as we're talking about this lost revenue money, is that where you're saying these mental health things are gonna fall under that?
Oh, no, so,
Because that
This-
should fall under the public health funding section, right? That's not an unrestricted.
well, we didn't allocate money specifically to mental health. So that's a separate category. So what I'm saying is,
This is the conversation we're having.
right, what I'm saying is
Are
you
we
do it.
looking at it as this? Or are we looking at it as?
Well, and that's
under-
what you
under
guys
that
can
heading?
decide. I mean, we can take some,
Is there any other money to just have a mental health category?
And that's up to
Since
council.
That was the fifth priority.
And it's
Yeah,
under the
exactly.
public health funding section, so we wouldn't have to take it out of the other.
well, right. I
Like
just
that
recommended
support
that
to
come out.
nonprofits to 250 for nonprofits, 250 for mental health, and 250 for tourism.
Aid to
I mean,
tourism.
yeah, could you do something like that?
Oh, absolutely, we could.
Right.
Yep. And that's at the will of the council.
Would tourism include like hospitality businesses?
Correct. Travel and hospitality as well. Mm-hmm.
Regarding the tourism
Yes.
section, is there, I guess I would propose an idea that we consider, like when we were discussing what do we do about investing in downtown, we created a task force of stakeholders relevant to that location, and of course, entities like the city, to say, well, we don't really know what we want to do here, but create a task force to kind of have some more of these more nuanced conversations about, well, what do we mean by tourism? What exactly are we wanting to do here? How should we go about it? To have those conversations, would there be interest in creating something similar to that for a focus on tourism? Get a sub-body going here to talk about, okay, so we've got $250,000 allocated for tourism for the past 2 or so budgets. I've been strongly advocating for $100,000 out of the budget for tourism, and we have yet to really figure out, like, well, what are we meaning by that, other than, funding Jamaica My Weekend or something like that. I guess I would propose to get more nuanced that we create a sub-body to explore that, and I guess I would welcome feedback on that
Wouldn't
idea.
that be like a partnership with Visit Quad Cities?
I would certainly include them on the task force.
I would only support a task force if it falls under the Open Meetings Act. It has to be public so
Oh,
that
yeah.
people can attend and any council member can attend.
We could also do a focus group. That would be another idea potentially.
We can call it whatever we want.
Or task force, whatever you guys want to call it. Focus group is a little different, but not much, I guess.
And I mean, again, with that, part of the grant, how many visitors are you bringing in? You know, you can
Data-driven.
Yeah, absolutely. You can parlay that with, yeah, we'll give you $10,000. Are you bringing 1,000 people in this weekend? You know, something like that. I'm sure the Backwater Gamblers would have loved to have some extra funding for all of the people they brought in for that one weekend, as an example, you know. Again, you make my weekend. Are you gonna bring 2,000 people? The Grand Prix, coming up, you know.
The
Could we-
Botanical Center.
Yeah, could we
Club of the
do extra
Arts.
things with another $10,000 brings another 500 people in? You know, I think it's things that, the parlay that Todd talked about, so.
So do we have some direction on that, or is that something we're going to talk about later on, based on Dylan's
Direction as far
suggestion?
as like splitting it into the three, is that what you're asking us, or?
I think both. I think that question's twofold. Splitting it into three, and then Dylan's recommendation of getting a focus group or task force in regards to the tourism part of it.
I like the idea of the three. I like dividing that money up and putting it, but I would say the mental health, put it under something else, put it under the public health services section of it, and
Oh, I would put the mental health under here because that's gonna be facilitated through a nonprofit. I mean,
Yeah.
mental health, if you go through like transitions, that's gonna be a nonprofit. I mean, I
I mean, you
feel
could use
that,
it either way, really.
right,
It's-
yeah, I feel that the mental health is going to be facilitated and supported by a nonprofit more so than anything else.
Whatever's easiest to report to the federal government.
Exactly.
Which is easier?
And we were not going to have to pay me, probably putting it in the umbrella of revenue loss or unrestricted funds, honestly, because
Oh,
we would just control that internally with the sub-recipient
But
agreement.
if we tie that into that, now doesn't that eliminate some other projects that we could do that aren't as restricted then?
Yeah, that's true too.
We've taken nonprofits and we've halved it again. And I understand why, for mental health, and I think that needs to
Well, we
be a
don't have
priority.
to have it. I mean, it could be 400,000 to 100,000 for mental health.
No, I'm just
I
saying,
mean,
Rock Island, I think, is a rarity, and for the number of nonprofits we have that take up the slack on providing a ton of services that are needed in our community. So, I know they weren't ranked in the top 5, but I just think that I wouldn't want to shortchange them.
I mean, ultimately, we want to do the best good for the best amount of, or the most amount of people with the money.
Right.
So
So I'm
and
just
it's
saying, like-
trying to figure out how to do that.
If we do 250 for mental health and 250 for tourism, you know, not-for-profits is a broader category than those two individual categories. Is there any other money anywhere else for that to
The
beef
thing-
it back up? We've cut it in half again.
Or we just keep the 250 for tourism, keep the 500 for nonprofits, but when we form the organization and we look at the grants, I mean, the grants have to be specific.
Right.
And the grants have to be reimbursement. We're not gonna give you money.
Right.
You have to do something, but the focus needs to be tied to mental health, housing,
Homeless
homelessness.
was identified, yes.
You know, I mean, those are the big things. I mean, there's a lot of great nonprofits in town that can get, that get money through paid subscriptions, paid memberships, dues, whatever. But then there's a lot of those nonprofits who do really the hard work with the hardest, you know, the most vulnerable demographics of our city, and they don't have access. I mean, they aren't charging. I mean, like Christian Care isn't charging people for their meals. They're just
Right.
giving them. So I think we gotta be, you know, for the support for nonprofits, I think we can write our grants in such a way that the grants are written to, how do you benefit the population of Rock Island?
I say we break it down further. I think we're kind of like, during this discussion, we haven't really talked much about the housing side of it.
That's-
You know, I mean, we're talking about you know, the tourism, we're talking about the mental health. I mean, there's only so much money in that pie, that pie there. So do we need to specify a breakdown further and monies that we would want to put towards that, or do we just leave it as a wide open category?
But we had
Housing,
housing in
well, we
another
do have,
category.
we do have
Yeah.
housing.
We got housing in another
I
one.
thought that was, but I thought that was tied in with the mental health under that one.
Affordable housing and infill housing are its own, and then you'll see the market rate housing as
Okay.
well.
All right, thanks for clarifying.
So I would almost
Okay,
leave unless
You're right.
somebody in our CED department thinks that we need to.
okay.
I think, like, I guess my point would be that we need to have more nuanced conversations about all three of these subject matters. I am not a mental health professional. I have no idea how far $250,000 goes. I don't know if that's too much money, probably not. I don't know if that's too little. I don't know, right? And we have a lot of mental health professionals in our community that can probably guide us in saying, well, this is the greatest need within your community, here's how we could partner, et cetera. I think we need to have much more.
I
new
personally think it should be
conversations.
higher, but that's just me.
My question is, with the mental health issue, is the reporting side of it. And are we gonna have issues with HIPAA? You know, what are we actually doing with this money? Are we just serving X number of people?
I don't think
But
HIPAA
we wouldn't
really
have-
applies on that though,
We
Mark.
wouldn't
I
have to
think
do
we're-
any reporting.
I would keep it under the
It's-
unrestricted or lost revenue category.
It would be summary reporting, they wouldn't be reporting.
Yeah, HIPAA wouldn't apply to that.
Right,
though.
it wouldn't be all the rigorous
As long as you didn't
requirements.
Name specific individuals, yeah, you're right.
Summary reporting.
But there
So,
wouldn't necessarily be reporting, because you wouldn't have to report it as ARPA funds spent, because it would come out of,
police and fire,
understand.
that's how we're gonna report it, yep.
We would want.
Because that's what we lost. We
We
lost
would
$10 million.
but if we're doing it as a
Right.
a reimbursement, then
Yeah.
we would get the information, the data, and the report before we awarded the money.
Absolutely, and we
Right.
would do a subrecipient agreement internally, just like CED does and other departments as well. Back to Dylan's point, is that the, kind of the will of the council that maybe we form focus groups or task force for this going forward, or do we want to discuss this?
We're going to
Later on.
individually meet anyway, correct?
We're meeting, so maybe we'll do that. When Todd and I start scheduling the one-on-ones for next week, maybe we'll get some feedback from that and figure out how we can do that. Dylan, does that work for you?
Okay, if you don't.
Well, I would like to get going as soon as possible with respect to the tourism discussion, so.
Okay.
You know, I mean, yeah, sure, if that's what,
Todd, can you meet Dylan tomorrow for your individual? No, I'm just kidding.
well, no, but I mean specifically
He wants to form a task force,
getting an
ASA.
entity together to start talking. I mean, been waiting for like 2 years now with money in the budget, and it's still just sort of like shrug, don't really know what we're doing.
Right.
I'd like to get some sort of thing together to start
I'm in
talking.
agreement with that.
We could even use like a study session and grab the players, public comment, everybody could attend type of thing.
Maybe.
If that's what the will of the council or not, I don't know, or.
Any kind of group, it's gotta be under Open Meetings Act.
It does, yes. Because I don't want to go sit in a meeting where I can't say anything. I have a lot to say about a lot of things.
I was gonna say, there's,
Okay, so I think we're in agreement. We're gonna meet individually, and it sounds like we're gonna get this hopefully going soon. Like, then later, like September coming up. And then just moving on, Brownfield. The recommendation was for $500,000. I talked with Miles and Tara. There is going to be, any day now, an opportunity, also out of that bipartisan federal bill came brownfields. And so I've talked with our National League of Cities team. If you guys remember early on, I indicated that we're part of that program. That's a free program from the NLC where they'll help us. And Tara and I can't guarantee we'll get it, but we're fairly confident we can get that grant once it becomes available with the help of our NLC team. Yes.
Did we want to say, one of my problems with that proposal was it didn't identify the location of that. You
Oh,
can get
is
it
it the
to me.
5th Street?
That would have been helpful
Yeah,
information.
it was kind of two things. A specific project, which is 2425 Fifth Avenue. It is a vacant lot owned by the city. It's the last brownfield site we own. When the downtown TIF sunset, there was a chunk of change set aside specific to that property. We were able to do a Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessment, so we know what the cost roughly, we certainly know the scope of site remediation would be. We don't have sufficient funds to cover it. So it's partially that, but then we also have a brownfield revolving loan fund. And so what we wanted to do is kick some money into it, because it's a bit low right now. So we could offer that as part of our suite of economic development incentives. There are plenty of brownfield sites around Rock Island as a former industrial powerhouse. And anyone who comes to us looking for a little help cleaning up dirty dirt would be able to take out a very low interest loan from that. So there's kind of two parts to the proposal there.
Dirty dirt, that's a good term.
Dirty dirt, gotta haul it out.
I'm gonna look that term up.
But anyway, those grant opportunities now have really become more available. So at this point in time, we think that specific to that one property, we'd be able to secure some funds to help cover the remaining funding gap to get remediation completed. We do have an interested party who wants to buy it and potentially develop it, and they're just sitting there waiting patiently for us to get it done. And then more generally, the long-term path for the RLF, the Brownfield Revolving Loan Fund, yet to be determined.
There it is. Okay. So third and fourth quartile recommended projects, demolitions, we do recommend $250,000. As you know, we have a lot of blight in the city. And I know there's some specific projects that are, areas that are pretty bad that, yeah, need to be torn down. So, and that meets a specific federal guideline criteria from the federal government. RIFAC, $750,000. I think the original ask was $1.2 million. We reduced that to just the critical funding needed for the pool and the lighting and the locker upgrades. Fleet replacement, we're recommending, there was, I think it was like over $5 million ask. We're recommending reducing that to just cover some of the police and fire that are in dire need, ambulances, things of that nature. We've got some old vehicles that our detectives are driving around. Yes?
What happened to the snowplows? I thought our.
Oh, they're on here still. They're on the next one.
Yeah, because we see pictures, right? Those are in really bad shape, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, and they're on additional Todd has a specific for that on the next slide. So, and we can talk about that on the next slide if anybody wants to dive into the fleets.
The fleet replacement for the detectives, are we purchasing these vehicles or are we leasing these vehicles?
I believe.
Actually, the fleet replacement dollars referenced here don't actually replace the detective cars. What these dollars would do, supplemented by existing funds that are in the fleet replacement program, is replace the snow fleet and then address our need for new ambulances. And Mike, you want to talk a little bit about that situation, or is Alan? Do you want to talk a little bit about it? I mean, we've got some vehicles that really need to be replaced, and the fleet replacement fund is in pretty desperate shape.
You might as well come up and talk about it. You came for this,
So,
listen to this, you might as well get up here.
I just want to
I'm
give you.
confused what we're talking about then. Are we talking, because on here it's talking about police and fire only.
We're going to the back page here, we're talking about the snow fleet, right?
Alan Vanderhayden is our fleet manager. I
Okay,
brought
but
him.
can I get an answer to
Go
the
ahead.
question first about the police, so for police and fire?
It should have been corrected to just say fire. Yeah.
Is it
So we're
lease
not
or?
doing anything with
Oh.
police?
No.
Okay.
Not with these funds. And this is a higher value.
Okay.
At one point, you know, as Samantha and I kind of put this together, our hope was to try to do both police and the
okay.
fire. And this dollar amount doesn't get to the police. The police detective vehicles, I think, would be another $360,000.
So, okay, even with that, are we leasing vehicles? I mean, or are we purchasing vehicles?
Yeah.
I understand it's not in this scope, but when we do, are we leasing or are we purchasing?
That hasn't been decided when we were to move forward with the police fleet.
Okay.
But we have done both.
Aren't we under a lease agreement with Enterprise right now for the police vehicles?
We have that for the
Patrol
officer,
squads.
the patrol squad,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. Right.
Not the detectives.
Okay.
I thought we were.
Did you want any additional information on the fleet? Or Alan?
Just talk about what you're going to replace with the snow fleet and with the ambulances.
On the snow fleet,
our single axle, in 2018, we replaced 4 of our 4 tandems. And we're going to now replace 8 of our 8 plow trucks, single axle plow trucks, 610. Along with 2 regular tandems for utilities, for main brakes, stuff like that, because we can't support the main brake situation in the winter with the snow fleet, because if we've got snow fleet and main brakes going at the same time, what happens is we end up not having enough equipment for everybody to use. So our utilities department needs 2 tandems, and that's in that snow fleet. Sorry about that. That's in that snow fleet bid. Okay, so it's 2 tandems with no snow equipment on it and 8 snow trucks. Just to be clear, so everybody understands what we're doing. As far as the ambulances are at their 10-year mark, which makes them high maintenance, reliability issues, updated equipment. The equipment is 10 years old that's in these ambulances. So it's just a time, the oxygen system, stuff like that. We're at the point where we need to replace them.
And
Okay,
how
I'm
many?
gonna ask a stupid question, because what are you talking about with the tandems? Size trucks?
Tandem is a 66,000 pound.
How many axles they have?
So the big trucks?
Yeah, they're the larger.
Layman terms for me, please, thank you.
Sorry, I'm a mechanic from way back, and I
felt it, so.
So, how many ambos are we gonna replace? 3.
That's our fleet. We have 2 that are mainly used and 1 in reserve.
Right.
And we roll them through so that the mileage stays the same.
Okay.
We're over 100,000 miles on each one of them. As far as the lease, we have current numbers from Enterprise, that if we decide to go into a leasing program, we can. So we kind of know as a fleet, one of my jobs is to find our best option. I feel we also, not only do we need to look at leasing, we need to look at purchase alongside of leasing, so that our equity value doesn't drop so low that we can't, we got to balance our lease to own in that system. So that's everything. I've got prices for leasing, got prices for replacement. I'm just trying to look at every angle so that everything's covered.
Can I ask a question about the snow fleet? So earlier in the year, we mentioned, you mentioned about getting smaller vehicles that can possibly plow the alleyways. Is that in this?
We leased 2 F-450 110 snow trucks currently, and that would be something we would look at adding a couple more of them if we go to the lease program or if we purchase, but that's not in this year's budget. That's not in '23.
So we do have the smaller vehicles, 4-wheel drive, 1-ton trucks with plows. We did start plowing alleys last year, or this past winter. And it's after the snowfall, after the residential streets are done, then we move into alleys. So we have started plowing alleys. We do have the vehicles to do it. We need more. They are not in this request, but we have implemented an alley snow removal
Low on
into our
priority.
snow removal plan. It takes about 3 days to get the alleys done after we're done with residential streets, is what we found with what we currently have for equipment.
That's impressive.
Do we own the current ambulances?
Yes.
Ambulances we own.
So are we potentially selling them? And where would the revenue from that go?
Two of them will be sold.
Okay.
And
where would
that
that
revenue will
go?
go back into the replacement fund.
Okay.
One of them will replace the emergency response truck that police currently has.
Okay.
So that, because they have an old, I think it's a 1995 they're currently running.
Does it
So
have
what we're
vintage
doing is
plates?
we're repurposing 1 ambulance to the police department,
Okay.
and 2 ambulances will be sold on the, whatever the best disposal process, surplus process we can do that benefits the city.
Just asking to have it.
We received some additional information a day or 2 ago that complicates our perfectly laid plan, and that's the cost of the the trucks that were estimated here, the snow fleet, have gone up in price, given the nature of vehicles. The longer you wait, the higher they cost. So we'll have to factor that in as well.
One more thing, in order to get build dates in 23, we're looking at about needing to have this done by the end of September. Because otherwise, we're gonna get build dates in 2024, and we're not gonna see the trucks until 2024.
And prices will continue to go up, I'm
And the
sure.
prices will continue to go up. And we are, you've seen pictures of the snow fleet,
Yes.
so you understand where we're at. It's kind of a dire need with the snow fleet.
It's not just the snow fleet, and I know, we asked for a lot more. The 50-plus vehicles that we asked for, they're in dire need. I mean, we need to move forward with those sooner rather than later. Of those 50 vehicles, just in the past 2.5 years, we've put in about $1.2 million in maintenance for those 50 vehicles. So that continues to grow year in year. And as we can upgrade those vehicles and lower that maintenance cost, along with more fuel-efficient vehicles, it will save each department.
Yeah, sometimes we forget about that factor. We look at the gross dollars, but we don't look at the other side of labor cost and materials to keep these things maintained. You could say have a savings there like we did with the energy savings contract that we have. A question real quick on vehicles. My understanding, we used to be at one time called depreciated set aside or depreciating vehicles and everything else, where we in the budget set money aside each year to where there was enough money so when you did need to replace it, it was there, anticipating that. My understanding is, and I might be wrong, that some of that got cut in budget cuts to balance it and everything else. Are we in a position that can we get back into that? So right now, we're fortunate to have this kind of fund to be able to, we kick that can down the road, and we got this fund to be able to compensate for that.
I would anticipate that after we buy these vehicles, that fund will have no money in it. Is that correct, Linda?
Will that replacement fund have any money left in it?
There will.
After this.
Once we were to, the budgeted amount that we have in this year's budget of approximately 1.7 million would almost deplete that fund,
Yeah,
the replacement fund.
As you indicated, what we want to do is try to put together a plan to get back on, a regular schedule of amortizing vehicles and setting money aside so that, we're not having this kind of conversation, that it just works as a regular replacement cycle. And my goal would be to try to build a program like that for building maintenance and probably computer replacements as well, replacement programs for those items so that they're not such a shock to the budget and we're not scrambling to try it. But that's difficult, right? I mean, to do that, but that would be certainly be the goal, would be to try to get back into that.
I bring that forth, I guess, just even for the council, when we're looking at budgets and everything else, that, sometimes it makes sense at the time, or it looks, balanced budget, but you pay for it sooner or later, you're gonna pay for that. And
A discussion.
Was that one of the reasons to go to leasing at that point?
because we didn't have the cash, and without bonding and everything else.
Cash on hand, we couldn't get what we needed for the police fleet, and so we leased that. You don't save a lot of money leasing,
Right.
but you don't have that upfront cost.
Not replacing our regular schedule really has, a lot of drawbacks. I mean, you end up paying so much to repair them and replace them. They don't function as well. You end up doing things like leasing them, and then you're really just paying interest. You're just financing the vehicles, which is, a detriment as well. If you keep them too long, you destroy the resale value of them. So it's really, really your best financial practice to get on a regular replacement cycle where you optimize the point where you can trade it in before it becomes a maintenance burden and you can get a good value for it.
We do have a amortization schedule, and it's paid through our asset works for certain vehicles, but our fleet our average fleet age is 15 to 20 years old. I can't keep charging people for cars that they've had for 20 years. Can't keep charging for people if their amortization schedule is only 10 years. That's the problem I run into. Everything is got the age to where the departments don't have to pay the amortization anymore because they've already paid for it for so long.
But yet we've depleted the cash in that
Yes.
pot to be able
Yeah.
to replace it, and that's where, I guess, Moses, where I was going is that we need to get back into that, and there could be, even if we get back into it, it starts from scratch on the new ones we got, but it's still, there's nothing in that fund to even take care of the ones we still haven't replaced yet. And so we're still behind, even if today or 2023's budget, we started amortizing these new vehicles, we're behind.
Mayor, I have a question.
I agree, and that's what, and I do bring that up, we kind of laugh about it, and that's a big number. But the point is, some point you're gonna pay it, sooner or later. Now, 5 years from now, whatever it is, that price is gonna have to be paid.
I have a question, Mayor. Because we have the ability right now, and in the last 3 years, we've been hit at least 3 times with surprises with regard to our firefighting fleet. And maybe, you know, Chief Yerke could address this. What's the average age of our, the larger apparatus, the BRTs? Big red truck?
Layman terms.
Big red truck.
So we've got 2 vehicles that are currently the oldest, engine 32, 7115, and our reserve engine 7747. So they're both coming up 20 years or more. Engine 33 is the newest, 2020. Engine 34 is 2016. The ladder truck is a 2015. So those are in pretty good shape. The rescue squad is going to need replaced here soon as well. So.
And the reason I ask that is those are absolutes. I mean, we don't want to come in unprepared or unable to budget or not budget for replacement of those vehicles. And we kind of really, you know, when you need them, you need them. And you don't want to have to worry, well, hey, you know, we lost an axle on this truck.
Right.
Or we lost, you know, a very important feature of a specific vehicle. Now we have to go out and spend $250,000 to try to replace one. That's probably a conservative number, but.
Yeah, and the current engine we have in reserve, we actually had to send that to Alexis, had about $40,000 worth, because they had to take the squirt off, do some refabrication just because of the amount of, you know, rust damage and frame damage, and then, you know, shore up a lot of the frame and body work. So that was a big cost just to keep that engine in reserve so that we can use if another one's down. So.
Right. Now, that kind of expense though would fall under these guidelines, the ARPA guidelines?
The police and fire specifically do. Anything outside of police and fire, we'd have to take out of the unrestricted or lost revenue.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the discussion about amortization, it's a political decision every year when we make the budget, right? I mean, I've repeatedly voted no on the budget because it doesn't invest sufficiently. So if we want to sufficiently fund the amortization fund, we just do that. And we haven't, just like every other city council before us. It's pretty simple.
But once again, it's not for tonight and everything else. There are funds, excuse me, Mike, but, you know, once again, we just talked, Linda gave the update Monday night, I'm trying to remember nights, that last year there was a $1.6 or $7 million.
1.7.
I'll call it excess type deal that you could roll over, and once again, do you work on budgeting in that instead of saying, okay, that's going to go into that fund for those type of vehicles versus into general fund for other areas, as an example.
And I don't, forgive me, police and fire, but I am going to go there. Every vehicle that is in our fleet is a critical vehicle.
That's right.
They're not laying
I agree.
around. They're used daily. And so the same needs, if they're responding to a police or a fire issue, Public Works is responding to a snow issue, a water issue, a sewer
Right.
backup.
That's right.
So, you know, in this list, there's a jetter or a Vector that's used to, clean our sewer mains. And so those are all items that we have to address. I know we're going to look at a broader plan, but
No, and
You're correct.
I will
I just-
apologize for saying, for implying that.
We're
that
used to
They
that.
were very
We're used
critical. because When the snow falls, I want you guys there.
Poulos is the last one to go see if it breaks up. No.
I guess I'll end with any additional funds we could get to get any additional critical vehicles, we would appreciate it.
In summary, I'm saying the same thing. We have an aging fleet. Name the department, it doesn't make any difference. We have an aging fleet. that is in dire need of a major refreshing, if you want to call it. And so we need to make sure we take care of that.
And then just to speak, please let me know, Todd or Mike, if I'm speaking too far ahead, but I believe that what we've recommended for the ambulances as well as the snow fleet are a time-sensitive issue. So it sounds like council understands, like, we need those ambulances. So maybe bringing that through the 1st or 2nd September meeting as a council item to approve.
Yep.
He's going, yeah.
Oh, I thought you were done.
So we are ready to move forward with the snow fleet and the 2 tandem axle trucks that he mentioned. We can bring that back to council September. The ambulances and any other police vehicles would need to go out for bids and bid specs. And so that would be, we wouldn't be ready for that until probably October, November.
Okay, that's fine. At this point, if everybody's agreeing upon with that, goes that direction, we can approve it when you're ready.
Yeah.
Bring the snow fleet forward.
Exactly.
All right. The Midtown Library support, we recommend the $500,000 of city support for our new library. And then Hubbard Carriage House, we recommend also $150,000 for that project, which is less than originally requested as well. And then I've listed out all of the projects that we did not recommend. Is there anything on there that anybody wants to discuss, or you want me to move on?
Move on.
Okay. And then the additional funding recommendations that the city manager put together were, we already talked about the snow fleet. New housing incentive, we're not sure what that looks like, but, you know, a partner, build new houses. As many of you know, Rock Island's kind of lacking in that demographic in terms of new housing. So that would be a further conversation, but something that I think several of you have identified as well. Police hiring, retention, and recruitment, $250,000. I'll let, if anybody has questions, I'll defer to Todd or the chief on that one. Downtown security, $300,000. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Do you want to talk about?
Could we just have some more specifics
Yeah,
on
just
that?
some
On the
definitions
police
or
hiring,
thought.
retention, recruitment?
Yeah, let me talk a
Absolutely.
little bit about
We
that.
actually, while we're at it, could we actually include
And then the license plate
the next
reader?
item down too, since we're on the downtown security?
yes.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
We could talk about the 3 kind of public safety related issues here, the recruitment, the downtown security, and then the license plate reader, at least kind of all at once, and get some input.
Where's yours, chief?
From the chief.
As far as the, I'll start off with hiring and retention. Obviously, I've been on the circuit lately. I just got done with WHBF, again, letting them know that we're trying to recruit officers. All the agencies are facing these issues. We're all coming up with ideas. We're offering bonuses to hire, bring people in as an incentive. So that's one thing we're looking at doing. If we did do that, of course, it wouldn't be like something you just pay up right off. We'd split it over like 3 years, so that way they stay. So, you know, that's what every agency is doing. So, and we actually, when a new officer starts, one of the things they sign off on is an agreement that if they were to leave within 3 years and go to another law enforcement agency, they have to reimburse prorated for the costs involved with that. So this would go in a similar way where we just come up with a dollar amount. We want to be competitive. I look at other agencies in the area, what are they doing? And then build that into as an incentive to, again, advertise, get it out there, and hopefully bring in either new recruits or even lateral entries. That's one of the officers we just swore in today is a lateral entry. Great. That's even, we get them out on the street faster. Retention is just that. We've got, I just sent a resignation, retirement notice to the city manager last week on one of our veteran officers who's leaving to go to work for, I actually kind of, I apologize. He's going to work for another law enforcement agency, so he's retiring and then going to work for somebody else. You know, the idea is we need to hold on to who we have. We're making progress, but it's slow progress. I'm a little concerned I might lose somebody else in the next couple of weeks that's, again, looking to go somewhere into the private field. So I need to do everything I can to hold on to those senior personnel as long as possible because we're still building on our you know, that first line, the lower level, our new officers. So that's why that's there, that retention to help. And again, same thing. It's not like a lump sum we're going to pay somebody and then they retire the next day. It would be spread out over a period of time to, again, keep them here for that period of time.
A good idea would maybe be to offer a higher bonus for that lateral transfer.
That's definitely out there. One thing with lateral entries, and I just did it, we actually, instead of starting at the bottom, usually there's 5 steps when you get hired. You start your base salary, and then every year you go up into the next range. For laterals, though, they get to start number 2. So that gets them started at a higher rate. We advertise out, and the last one we just now swore, and he's doing that. So, and that would just be added on top of that. License plate recognition, is that the next one? Or downtown security? Downtown security, we want to have some more people down there. Again, the biggest thing right now is staffing, but what I envision with the funding is we talked about different ideas when we were talking about downtown security, maybe private security. I see there's some concerns with that. We've had some discussions. I think it would be better if we did go with some type of an ambassador model where we have people there that are there to help, maybe be extra eyes. But when it comes to actually engaging or dealing with individuals, that's where more of a law enforcement function, and we don't want to have someone in there that maybe isn't well trained, that could cause more issues than what we were trying to deal with. So the idea behind this is way back when we used to have officers work in the downtown, it was paid for through a taxing, basically a fee that was charged to the late night or 3 extended hours license holders. So that was the DSA, Downtown Security Assignment. Alderman Poulos may remember that. But we actually, officers got paid overtime, and that overtime cost was paid for out of that fee that was charged to those license holders. So what I see is this could be used towards paying those either overtime or costs to have officers down in the downtown area, the CBD, during specific times or as much as we can. My understanding is Dari may have some a location available. Maybe we can even do a substation. Back when we used to do substations in the Century Woods and the Longview area, would it be great to have maybe a substation where, again, the ambassadors, the officers, all can work out of there. Officers can come down, park their squad car. We can have a computer in there. We had computers in the other substations. They can do police reports. They can pretty much work out of there if they needed to. If we have an event, that would be the area they could kind of station out of. So, again, this is the overall idea behind it, is to have that funding available to pay for that. Any questions on that?
I do.
Go ahead.
So, of course, so I hate to say this, but I have to. I love the idea about a substation, but I have to say I will see a substation best used in an area where we're receiving more shots fired. We're not receiving shots fired. We're not receiving those level of issues in the district. That is my only concern about putting $300,000 into security in the district when we have areas that we know of that will benefit more from a substation. I don't know how to do that. I don't want to take away from downtown, but I mean, when we're really looking at the city as a whole, if we want to get a grasp on that, I would rather see that money used at the substation in some of those areas that will, prevent some of those issues or reduce some of those issues, because you can't prevent anything.
Sure, and I think it would be great. I don't object to it in any way. I will say, though, back when we had the substations, that was paid for through federal grant. That was back in 1994, the crime bill that put 100,000 police officers on the street. We actually were staffed at that time, the police department, if my numbers are right, my recollection is right, I think we were at 87. 4 of those positions, those 4 CAPE officers is what it was that was assigned to those substations. They were the Longview area and the Century Woods or the Douglas Park area. Those officers' salaries were completely paid for a 3-year period through that grant. Now, over time, when the grant funding runs out, and of course, money becomes tight, we've gradually gone from that 87, I believe it was 87 or 88, I have to go back and look, but and we're now down to 81 officers. Again, so that's what happens with funding. But I totally agree with what you're saying. It's just a matter of having the people there to staff it.
Is this, if I may, is this specifically targeted to the, for lack of a better word, the SSA area? Because I agree with Alderperson Robinson. I mean, there are we see where the issues are happening. The chief is keeping all of us appraised of where the issues are happening, and I think you put the Band-Aid on where it bleeds.
So while I'm sorry, go ahead, Jen.
So what I'm hearing from the businesses downtown is that, in their mind, security is number one. They don't mind paying for overtime for officers to be down there and paying that through the SSA. But that wasn't a priority in the budget we were presented.
So what I would like, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, kind of piggybacking on that, I mean, on conversations, and I know that I've even had with Jack on this, and we had talked about, you know, just throwing stuff around, and the idea of one building, like an ambassador area that could be used as a substation, and it's like one, so maybe a partnership between, you know, this and that, and then that would maybe free up some more money for another substation, like, you know, Alderperson Robinson was talking. I mean, there's obviously different things you can do, but I was just kind of bringing that up because I know there was some conversation, you know, that I know that I've expressed, and anyway.
The thing, though, if I may, is downtown the substation makes sense, but in other areas where we're having a problem,
both of them.
you need shoe leather on the street, and you need the guys that are mobile, because the people that are causing the issues are mobile. So we need to keep them.
Yeah.
We need to put them, for lack of a better word, at least in the area that, and we still, I don't know if you break down these by reporting areas still, or you do it in another manner. I don't know how you do it now, but.
The RAs have changed now. We're in a new RMS system, but we're working that out. What this all boils down to, again, it goes to staffing, even with the downtown. I don't have the people right now. My hope is that we will. My goal is as long as we keep the progression going that we're seeing, we'll be fully staffed, hopefully by next year. The other thing is, and that's where it kind of leads into when I talk about license plate recognition and the camera system, that all plays into some of what we're talking about also with the issues that we're talking about in those areas that are hotspots.
I think, sorry, Judy.
So the staff, this 300,000, are you talking 100,000 a year, or is that?
That's to be determined.
I think there's a lot to be determined, and, you know, one of the things is how many people do you need, what times do you need them, and that's something we would probably work together with the business community and the safety committee and try to identify how that would be best used.
Let me just kind of say this, is when we had the downtown security officers, I think Alderman Parker's referenced them as the blue shirts that were running around. They primarily worked the evenings. That was our downtown, the bars, situation like that. That was where we had the largest demand. However, we tried to always assign at least 1 to 2 during the day to bike patrol to work downtown so they could meet with the businesses when things were open, because people liked, again, the businesses liked having those officers there. They liked seeing there, they liked having that contact. If there's any problems, they would let them know. So it depends on how the downtown starts to look. Our nightlife is not as demanding as what it was, which is good. You know, generally now that's allowed me now to reallocate resources from one shift to another to cover our busy times, because I'm not needing them at the late night hours anymore like we were before. So that's good. So maybe we do need them more during the day and the early evenings opposed to late nights like we were before. It all depends on what are the needs of the downtown.
And that's what I was going to say. And I'm not being rude. I'm down there every week, every day almost. We don't need a substation down there at this point. The business isn't there. That's the truth.
The substation idea.
It's a hypothetical.
Yeah, it is. What does the down kind of look like when this whole design comes through? That's I don't have no. I don't know what it's going to look like. What's the needs going to be? We're trying to plan ahead for that.
But if you combine it with an ambassador type of person down there, then it's a multifunctional area. And just so when we say substation, I don't always perceive it as we have to have someone manning the substation.
No.
It's like setting an empty squad car in the street. It's a deterrent. They see it. They see a substation, They don't know somebody's in there, right? It's
Yeah.
it's a store, I mean. but it
Our
can be used-
substations even before were not
Correct.
manned all the time.
Correct. So
They
but
were
you-
just an
if
area
you-
to go to when you have officers working, and the idea was is that as opposed to them coming back to the police station, do police reports, keep them out there. So if people wanted to, they could knock on the door. If something happened, they could respond quicker. That was the idea, is have them in the areas. It all goes back to community policing. Have them in the areas where they're needed most. Same thing with this idea with a possible substation downtown. If that's where our officer is needed, if we need, I give you an example, Moline Police Department has their little substation at South Park Mall. They have an officer sign there. There's not an officer there all the time, but they have one there at specific times throughout the week. It'd be the same thing based on what the needs are. Okay?
License plate reader?
License plate recognition. We have been using license plate recognition for, I think, 2 or 3 years now on a small scale, mostly as a pilot program. It definitely has potential. Our system, though, is very limited on what we can do. It's the information that we were collecting, or being able to, the information was coming in at from our entry points from Davenport, which was the Centennial Bridge. We didn't have the Arsenal covered, but we did have one over on 7th Avenue at 92 for a little while. We were trying out different things. The other thing is and it showed some success when we did it for stolen vehicles. It would send an alert when a stolen vehicle came in or left the city. We intercepted some of those, and that worked out good. The problem is it's relying, again, on our server system, and it's only got whatever information we put into it. What we're looking to do is get into, again, the council, we're all talking about cloud-based earlier. Police department's already moving that way. Fortunately for us, we're ahead of the game when it comes to our body cameras, our evidence storage as far as electronic data. We're ahead. We're one of the only agencies right now are not dealing with some of the issues with the new CAD system, with getting information and sharing it with the state's attorney's office, with everybody else, because we're already on evidence.com. We're doing all that. We're already taking photographs with phones that are going directly into evidence, so we're no longer having to take cameras out to the field. There's no more having to download information. Everything's direct. If there's citizens' videos, things like that, we go to residential, we send them an email or a text to invite, and they just upload that information, goes straight to our evidence. We're saving so much time by doing that. And again, speeding things up, everything from our squad cars to our body cameras. This is the next step. This is another cloud-based system. We would be leasing these. We would set up where they would go. Again, the entry points are a big place, the main areas we want to focus on. But this now hooks us into a network, a state, national, as big as a company gets, basically a network of information. So we're not just talking about, and right now, I can tell you Silvis Police Department already has these. East Moline looks like they're going to be getting them. I'm not sure which way Moline's going to go yet. I think they're looking they're looking at 2 vendors. This is one of them that we're contemplating. And if we were to go with this one, we'd have the Illinois Quad Cities, but all the other agencies that are using this, there's 2 primary systems that are being used. This is one of them. This will allow us, again, to locate vehicles or be aware of activity and give us an investigative tool that we don't have now, especially when we're going and investigating a shots fired situation where cars are being involved. Many of these cars are stolen that they're using now. You're all aware. It would be nice if one of these cars enters the city, we can alert, hey, this car's reported stolen, it just entered here. Maybe we can prevent a shots fired because now we're responding to looking for a stolen vehicle as opposed to one that's already committed a crime and now it's trying to flee. So, that's just one aspect of it. The other thing is the investigative side. When a crime does occur, now we can go back. We can also see where that car was, the time, if we have a serious crime like a homicide, what were all the cars in the area? If we don't have any suspects, we can start looking at that. All these things open up more opportunities for us for information. And again, it doesn't lie on our service, it's cloud-based. And we're sharing this information with other agencies also.
Bettendorf has them. Bettendorf has got it
Yes.
in there. And
Yes.
it did, I talked to them, and it did actually solve an issue of a car. We were able to watch it come in and out of the town, out of city.
Yes.
How long is the lease for?
As long as we want it. It's
How
basic,
long does this 225 get?
well, it depends on how many cameras we get. I'll give, basically, it's $2,500 per camera per year. Now, the initial install, there's like a $300 install just to get it up, because they put the cameras up. They own them, we just lease them, but all the information's coming, we have access to. If something breaks, they replace it. Doesn't cost us anything. It's just like the body cameras. We're entering into our contract. If one of the body cameras breaks, we just send it, they send us a new one. Taser breaks, send it, they send us a new one. We're paying for a service, and that's what they're providing.
And was it going to talk about troubled areas and everything else? And I believe before we can put a lot more cameras also, not just police officers, but put cameras in some of these troubled areas. And sometimes that actually can deter and or document a lot better than even a police officer around, because he can't have eyes 24/7 in a specific area where a camera does. And so
This goes back to, we're short-staffed, we have to rely more on technology to help supplement that.
That's right.
And
So
that's
it's,
what
and here's a little off-the-wall thinking, but you could take the library mobile, in the evening it's not being used, it could be a substation. Park it in the troubled areas and have it marked and make it a substation.
Well, no one would expect that, that's for sure.
That's
Police are
exactly,
there.
see, how
I was
about
here
that?
to return my book. Does anybody else have any questions for me?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, then we have revenue loss, recommending $1 million TBD. You know, again, that could go towards costs that are over budgeted, or things were short in the general fund, and others. Also, the road projects, recommending $1 million. I don't know if you want to talk more about that, Todd, or if anybody has questions about that.
Mike might talk about how that could be used.
Okay.
You're getting your miles in today, buddy.
Trying to get his steps.
And your steps in.
It could be used in a variety of different ways or locations. Initially, we were thinking that $1 million should go, so everybody can see the bang for their buck on Arterial Street. We have projects currently in our CIP. We could roll it towards that and maybe look at moving a project up. And when I'm thinking of like 20th Street or something like that, it could be a pavement patching program where we do a little bit in several different projects in each ward. That way it's split up that way. So there's really no right or wrong answer to that. $1 million doesn't go very far, as you all know. So you're looking at, depending on the type of construction, it could be as short as one block. So a pavement patching program, doing small sections, you could maybe get 20 or 25 locations done in smaller increments. So, but it all goes to a good cause, and we're happy to get it and improve the streets.
It's what the people want.
Would we still have the same restrictions in that lost revenue then? So we would not, because of the road projects are not covered under ARPA, but through the lost revenue, then that would be a usable fund.
And Samantha has run the numbers, and the program as proposed fits within the framework of the lost revenue in eligible
Absolutely.
categories.
Yep, and if we're ready to proceed to the next slide, I can show that with the overall budget.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine. I included that at the end there. So I broke it down by what we call restricted funds, right? Because we have certain requirements we need to report to the federal government, and that's the majority of the projects. So this is just a different way that I've presented it. And I've got the expenditure categories. And so the overall restricted, $16,969,650.85. Subject to change, of course. And then for the unrestricted funds, which again, that's that lost revenue, unrestricted. And there we go. We've got $9,517,709.84. So are there other items we need to discuss, or you want me to go back to the budget, or?
I'm going to throw one out just because we talked about this one so much. We talked about the vehicles and the age and kicking that can down the road and everything else. I do want to jump in, and some of the stuff didn't make the priority and everything else, but with the downtown library, there's a lot of issues there. It's old, and we got to be careful we don't kick that can down the road on a number of issues there either. Now, whether it's with ARPA and whether we, don't want to backtrack or anything else, but it's more of just jumping that out there. They got the $500,000 for the new one.
Yeah.
But the downtown one, we can't forget that if we kick it down the road, we're gonna end up like other buildings or the trucks and everything else, that is beyond, the conditions that are just so expensive, that we have issues. And, that is a cherished, not only building, but location. A lot of people like that, location for the library and everything else. And so I guess I'm just bringing this up.
So do we split that cost? So instead of the 500 all going to the new one, do you split it and?
I'm not sure if that's the answer. It may be. The project up, the other one needs the money also because cost overruns and everything else. I wasn't suggesting that, but not saying we can't. But I guess an FYI, it's more of a statement than anything else. But that might be a solution to it, or not have to be split half and half. It could be just, but of course, there's millions of dollars of projects downtown. So the 250,000 wouldn't go very far, but it obviously is, as they say, better than nothing. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to piggyback on that. I thought that was an ongoing theme in the staff projects. A lot of them were for building maintenance type projects. And I kept writing on my thing, why is this coming here? Why are we not including building maintenance costs in the budget, or trying to set aside some amount of money for building maintenance so it doesn't get to that point?
Yeah, it's really a best practice, and it's kind of referred to earlier, the ideal is to create a building repair and replacement fund and amortize improvements that you need, and then fund them a little bit every year, so that when the roof needs replaced, you have the money in the bank. But it's a challenge to include that kind of thing in the budget, and what oftentimes happens, and I think it's happened here, is when you're on hard times, that's where you cut or reduce your funding. And
But when you keep putting off maintenance costs, eventually I think it costs you more in the long run.
yeah, you can't afford to do it, but you can't afford not to do it either, because it's gonna cost you
Well,
more in the
exactly.
long
It's the
run.
same thing with your own house, when all of a sudden you need to replace a roof or something, and, I can't even imagine they are now, but, yeah.
Yeah, the water and sewer system, the same way. We're behind on that one. There's a lot of areas that unfortunately we're behind on. So I don't want to just single one out, but we did pick on the fleet deal a little bit. And I thought, and there is the other options, and far too premature and everything else, is obviously that's a separate levy and everything else, and some could be addressed with that also.
What were the cost of all of those upgrades that have to be
And if
done
Angela
to
wants
the
to talk about it, or at all, I hate to rewind here too much.
So
but-
I added them up, and they're close to 900,000 to do the wiring, the restrooms, the windows,
Got a problem over there?
the flooring, and the interior painting. It's about $900,000.
And we have put in about $1 million over the past 10 years. So it isn't that we've just kicked the can down the road. It's just we've kind of come to the point where we either need some CIP support, which we haven't received in a while, or yes, we do need to have it in our budget and laid out. And we do have a plan. We know what we're doing, and we know what it costs. Unfortunately, it just keeps going up and up and up like everybody else's. So
Yeah, and I think
is your question.
the other thing that we run into is when the library comes forward with the levy, it gets knocked down every year.
Yes.
My point.
And it gets knocked down every year, and those costs are, we knock it down, and council's the one that then decides this stuff isn't gonna happen, and the can
Right.
gets down the road. And if the council would go ahead and approve the levy that the library has asked for, then a lot of these things would get taken care of, instead of constantly asking the library to do without and do without and do without.
Thank you. Yes.
That's exactly, that was my point also, and it's exact. So it's more food for thought as we're talking tonight, and looking forward to the future of budgets and even ARPA, but, so, Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to digress.
No, these are good conversations that I think are needed. Are there other things that,
I just want to make, and maybe it's a clarification just for me.
sure.
So the ARPA funds are additional funds that we have. We still have our capital improvement projects, our capital improvement budget, where we're going to continue to use our funds to fund those capital improvements. So a lot of the stuff that perhaps didn't get captured in ARPA, it's not that it's not going to happen, it's just going to then be paid for, I'm assuming, out of capital improvement things, just, you know.
Yeah, this will be an ongoing conversation, and, you know, we're kind of at the point where we're preparing to begin talking more about the next year's budget, and we can talk about some of these projects and some of the challenges during that process as well.
What is the funding source again for capital improvement projects?
Gaming.
Yeah, it's been gaming traditionally,
Right.
yeah, and that's why you're hearing people say for a couple
No,
of years.
most gaming
we-
goes to bond payments now.
Not any
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, gaming is always first debt service. Whoops.
Did you want to comment, Linda?
Yeah, I was
on
going to
that?
say, does
Talk a
Linda
little bit
Barnes
about
want
it.
to come up, our finance director?
So I guess for the overall CIP capital improvement budget, there are several funding sources. So for example, Public Works, there's water rates, water, wastewater, et cetera. CED, they have like TIF funding also. Gaming, this year or for 2023 will be for debt only because we're trying to replenish our gaming fund. And then general fund, you know, if that's kind of like an option, what do we have available in the general fund? And as I said on Monday night, we do have 1.7 million to consider, you know, for CIP. Like I said, there's several revenue sources.
Motor fuel tax.
Yep, motor fuel tax, what else am I forgetting? So yes, several
Motor
funding
fuel
sources
tax.
for that.
Trodes. Okay.
Okay. Any other
Looking forward
discussion?
to the one-on-ones.
Okay, so we'll move forward. So I will be contacting each of you tomorrow and setting up meetings with Todd and I for further ARPA discussion.
So in the one-on-ones, what are we doing? Just talking more about what you presented
ARPA,
today?
yeah, just what you personally, kind of what the overall plan, just to get a feel from each individual council member where they're at and thoughts, ideas, feedback.
Then we come back and discuss again in this setting?
Yeah, I think.
I guess I'm just trying to
Yeah,
get the
yeah,
purpose of
oh,
the
absolutely.
one-on-one.
I would say have to be, if we want to be mindful, Alderman Hurt, if he doesn't, he's going to be out for a few weeks, so maybe after he gets back, late September, we could do, maybe that last week in September, we could do another special meeting and come back and discuss all of these things and start.
Would we need a special, I mean, because
Or we
they're
could,
really
we could,
hard. Could
yeah,
we
I
do like
know,
a
I know. We could maybe do
study
a.
session?
Yeah, we could start a 5 o'clock study session, go from 5 to. Yeah, I mean, we could do something like that, figure out.
You could zoom in. You can always zoom in.
I mean, the governor extends it
get here.
again, so we'll see.
Wait, I'll be here. I'll be all right.
Oh, that's true. We can make him zoom in now.
Figure it out.
Mute him, but.
Hey, that goes
So-
two ways.
That's so true.
Believe there's any
Is there anything else?
further discussions or?
I am going to throw out, we don't have a place for just other business and everything else, but just because it dovetails into Dylan talking about tourism and everything else. Visit Quad Cities did have some people in town, actually the next 3 days, that write articles for different magazines and our organizations, some are freelance, but about tourism and traveling and that sort of thing. And I spent a little time with them this morning through the city of Rock Island, and it was interesting talking to them and everything else, but it was talking to them about enlightening. They said, boy, the Quad Cities has got so much to offer. You know, each one city, sometimes it may be hard to to do a travel article on, and boy, go there just for that one city. But when you add all the cities together and all the amenities and everything else, they were just so impressed And I had a chance to be with them at QC Coffee and Pancake and Boji's Mustard. And those two were they were elated with those two operations. But just want to say that there was 4 individuals there that will be out there writing articles for traveling and visitors to encourage them to come to Rock Island, but the Quad Cities as a whole also. I just want to visit Quad Cities, put that together.
I'm having
Kudos
dinner
to
with
them.
them Friday.
Oh, are you meeting with them Friday? All right, so yeah, there you go. See, so it goes on. They're here till Saturday or Sunday, visiting different parts. So just wanted to throw that out when you talk about tourism. It's not like, don't want to make it sound like nobody's making any efforts. There are efforts out there.
And then I do want to say, I had a ward meeting last night, and I just want to share with you all, the people that attended, they love Rock Island. I mean, they think that we're doing a great job. They're very supportive of the council. They're very supportive of the staff. It was a wonderful ward meeting. But I just wanted to share that with you, that you know, there's a lot of, as aldermen, we hear a lot of negative, we hear a lot of complaints, but I just wanted to share that there's a huge contingency of people out there that really think this is a great place and that we're doing a good job. So thank you all.
Okay. That's the case. We need a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn to September 12th.
Can we get more of those motions? No. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. I assume there's no discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderperson Swanson.
Aye.
Parker. Pulis.
Aye.
Aye.
Robinson.
Aye.
Hurt.
Yes.
Aye. Moses, I do not say here because she didn't start with you.